phase two that had no authority for the HOA to maintain their landscaping, but basically all the neighborhoods except for phase three. And so I got a legal opinion on that, on how to resolve it. And so what we've decided to do based on the opinion is to continue to charge it, but expeditiously take a vote from each neighborhood by mail for the authority for us to take care of the landscaping in those communities. And that language that they'll vote on will be identical to the phase three, which is good language, but it just wasn't budgeted properly in years past. So here in the next week to 2 weeks, I will be getting with the neighborhood reps for those neighborhoods and discussing with them on the rollout of the vote.
You said take care of the landscaping. Did you mean the irrigation and plant replacement?
Irrigation, plant replacement, right.
But we're supposed to take care of the landscaping, but it's silent as to irrigation and plant replacement, or
No.
or is this silent to landscaping as well?
Silent to everything.
Oh.
There is no authorities in those neighborhoods for us. It's just like anybody else's supplements that lives in the master where the HOA does not maintain landscaping.
Okay.
And so my first thought was maybe there was an amendment that I didn't have. And so that's one of the things the attorney checked into as well. And there were no amendments related to landscape irrigation or plant care.
So once that passes, they will be exactly the same as phase three?
That's correct.
Okay.
So what type of
You're not
dollar
on.
figure are we talking about?
Thank you. So $5 per house per month for plant replacement, $5 per house per month for irrigation. And then unrelated to the document situation, we also did an audit, somewhat of an audit of sorts, on the land that we're maintaining. And we found that the Master Association has been maintaining some land in some of the neighborhoods that is actually residential. So we had the master landscaper back that out of their proposal, and we had the residential landscaper include that in their proposal. So, and to clarify, when the community was first developed, it's done differently, a lot of different communities, but I think because I have to assume, because this community's products are very similar, meaning some communities have yards that are twice as big as other ones, where I think, but probably because of that, what they did is just got an average cost for all the lots in the community and set the rate. So what that means is that with the increased size, the new rate has to be set, and that equates to $6 per house per month. So the total increase there would be $16 per house per month. That's to take care of the increased landscaping, all of the plant replacement, and all of the irrigation repair.
All right, I'm kind of at a question here. So we're talking about not common areas, correct?
That's correct.
So Stony Hill, let's say, we do not have, so that they would not be in that, since we do not do, we don't have a bulk agreement for landscaping. We would be exempt from that, Stony Hill and Keon.
That's correct. The neighborhoods
Okay.
I'm speaking of are Anguilla,
Yeah.
Belleville, Castleberry, Clairfont, Astwood, K Circle, Greendale Place, Woodbourne, Hopefield, Lambay Court, Lavaca, Maleta, Vario.
And then to that question was, we were talking about phase three, how the HOA was maintaining that when the association, the sub-association, I guess was, are we going to back bill them for that, or are we going to eat that?
Eat that.
Do we know how much we are eating?
I do not have that number. But you can, it's pretty easily obtained, $6 per house per month. Is there 613 homes? And then you can multiply that over how many years the phase three homes have been there, and it's varying numbers.
So would there be a reason why the board wouldn't at least try to recoup some of that money, since it was delineated in the documents?
That can be a discussion of the board. I would not like it to be a part of the budget,
Correct.
But absolutely, if you want that to go on an agenda, we can discuss that.
Scott, the only ones that are going to be exempt from that are the attached villas on Anguilla and Pamblico, because their landscaping comes under their sub-association. So they're out of that picture. But you would have to calculate when each house was occupied, and then it would be a monumental task to try and figure out how much each owner owned. And then how is this going to equate to if the house is sold again? So it would be great in theory if we could collect, even if we could collect back 1 year, would be a nice difference. But it's going to be a monumental task to try and get that, I would imagine.
Scott, this came to light because when Florida Evergreen started, they brought in a big bill for a lot of irrigation repairs. So apparently we were not doing it for a while, or not doing it sufficiently. So they had to catch up, and that big bill made us say, wait a minute, what is this? Where'd this come from? So this whole discussion came from having our eyes open that was going on.
I understand that. I'm cognizant of that fact, but at what point do we say to other people too, you owed, but it's okay not to owe, and we're just going to call it a wash? So at some point we can negotiate if we do have an irrigation bill for $60,000 and just, say, hey, listen, this is what we need to recoup. It shouldn't be on the rest of the homeowners to pay for somebody else's irrigation that they're not benefiting from. Just an opinion.
I don't disagree with you, but
Hi, Jerry, would you also make a comment?
You're not
as to
on,
how
Don.
this works?
Don?
How about now? A comment that it's not each homeowner, it's each neighborhood. The billing is not, if house A needs to have irrigation work done, they're not billed directly, but it goes into the neighborhood that they're in, and it's a community charge for that neighborhood. So that, just explain how that works.
Well, that's pretty self-explanatory. Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
The thing I would like to add, though, is with the $5 per house per month for both plant replacement and irrigation, again, there's no historical data. I talked with the landscape contractor. We feel that's a conservative number. Of the most importance here is us dealing with my corporate office and accounting and making sure that these neighborhoods have their own accounts, meaning that if there's any surplus at the end of the year, that surplus stays with that home. Because my fear is that we have to budget conservative, because after the year starts, I can't go back and ask for more money, without doing a special assessment and going through all that. So I thought it was important to budget conservatively, but the same, equally as important or more important, is if we're budgeting conservatively, to make sure these folks know that their money is staying with their neighborhood, and it will do one of two things, and eventually both. One, it will start funding a surplus, so if anything unusual happens to that neighborhood, they'll have some money without having to do a special assessment. And then ultimately, once that surplus gets to a comfortable level, then you could start looking at either maintaining assessment rates, even though there might be an increase in landscaping, or even reducing rates. Ultimately, the neighborhoods would have that opportunity. So, any other questions regarding the neighborhood?
Yeah, Jerry, is the plant replacement and the irrigation repair, is that covered under oversight by each neighborhood, or who monitors that?
The master. So, to Scott's point, he misspoke a little bit, but a lot of people do. It's not a sub-association. It's actually a neighborhood. It's part of the master association. So the master association manages that.
Okay, well, I guess my question is, let's say I live on Hopefield, it's a neighborhood, and I have some plants replaced in my yard, and I continually hit sprinkler heads with my lawnmower, break them, and who's monitoring that I'm not abusing the system, or that Crawford is not abusing, looks to me that we're spending $750 a week in sprinkler repairs. Okay, who's monitoring that, you know, that making sure that that's actually being done?
Yeah, so that would be, again, the master association, I would be responsible for that. And when bills go in, for instance, sprinkler heads, it would be rare that we ever pay for a sprinkler head. These would be more irrigation system repairs.
But we're doing $750 a week of irrigation repairs?
No, what we did is added up the amount we were spending community-wide in those neighborhoods, not just one neighborhood, and then we averaged that out and then added around a 20% comfort level to be conservative, knowing that we couldn't go back to the well, so to speak, afterwards. So it's a conservative number is the answer to that. Doesn't mean just because we budget it, doesn't mean we're going to spend it.
Okay.
I
Which
think
is
you're talking
why-
about two different things. You're
Yeah.
talking about the master at 36,000, am I correct?
Well, there's
There's
36,000
6,000.
here in irrigation.
Right.
My question is
Sprinkler
same
maintenance.
as Al's, is that irrigation number that's in this budget dealing with just the common area, or does that include also these neighborhoods?
That includes just the common area and the master, and that's the reason
Well,
we're
his question
trending.
is, why is that such a huge number?
Well, I mean, I can grab detail on that. It's not sprinkler heads, I will tell you that. I mean, for $36,000, we're trending at,
Yeah, that's a full-time
we're,
job.
we're trending at
trending?
we're trending at $50,000.
In
The
common
budget-
areas, irrigation, maintenance.
Yep, so we are, at common area irrigation maintenance, we're trending at $50,000. Our budget's $36,000. The reason that went down considerably was because we broke out the neighborhoods from that number.
Well, I do know that in years past, that was a concern, and it was going to be, nothing could be repaired if it was over a certain dollar figure, and it had to be inspected, and Al was the one that was tasked to do that, and then that's not happened lately.
Yeah, I think they're definitely, I mean, just coming from the business, that's a lot of irrigation repair for a piece of pipe that costs
Cents.
$5 for 100 feet. Excuse me, so I would at least, you know, historically look for something that's saying, here's where, excuse me again, here's where the bulk of our money is being put, whether it's in phase one, the common areas by the dog park or something, and again, like Al was saying, why? What's the reason that is it because pipes are getting crushed because cars are parking on the grass, or what? That's a heck of a lot of, coming from the
Well-
industry,
Well,
that's a
I think,
lot of money.
Scott, also, it's not just the pipes and the sprinkler heads, but all those monitoring boxes. I know in the villas, every time we had to replace anything like that, it was very, very costly through Crawford, all the electronics that went along with it. And those are everywhere. And I agree, we need to have a monitoring system, but it's just not the pipe and the head.
Oh, again, you know, I owned a business. I know what a box costs, and if the guy's charging us $1,000 for a monitoring box, we need to know that because I know what a box costs, and I know what it takes
Well,
5 minutes to.
lawnmower running over the lid of the box shouldn't be our cost. They should pay for it themselves,
Right.
put a new one on there.
And yeah, we can get some sort of. We're not. All of us don't need to be involved in this, but at least someone who has a point person to see exactly, you know, what that cost is and why. Because, like Don said, if they're running over 50, you know, sprinkler box heads or, you know, covers a month or whatever and charging us, that's unacceptable. I mean, they're not sitting right in there because you should be able to go over them without ruining them.
Perhaps we need to have a specific committee, but Allison is back here. We may want to ask her if somebody's overseeing that.
Well, I thought we had an answer to it, that Al was going to approve them before they actually did the work.
I've never had one request to go out and look at anything.
No, that was discussed.
Oh, okay.
With the previous board, because there was concern when they were reviewing that line item, how it was out of kilter.
You know,
Well, I don't think we need a committee. I think somebody that knows what they're doing, just one
Well,
person.
give me the checkbook, and if I won't write them the check if I don't inspect it.
So if Al,
It's a full-time job.
if you're willing to volunteer, I get a monthly report on the wet checks, where this comes from and the repairs that are needed with a proposal. I'll be happy to share that with you, and we can discuss it and go out in the field and inspect if you could help me do that.
Well, that would be after the fact. You'd be inspecting what had been done.
No,
We're saying it should be
When we get
done,
the proposal, I think
okay,
we can.
before the work is done.
That's correct.
Okay.
And this is just a question, though, and again, nothing against you, because I know how handy you are, but isn't that something that should be tasked with a staff person? We have a maintenance guy on staff, and again, we all have our own things here, and we do a lot as volunteers here, but I think something like that should be something tasked at a staff level position, and if there is a question with that, you know, that should go up to you as the GM. I don't think the board needs to be involved in sprinkler pipes or what was done. That to me, we're paying a maintenance guy who that should be in his purview.
Actually do not have anyone that's capable of doing that. That position is not a maintenance director. It's more of an entry-level type of maintenance person. So it's just staff availability to do it. I just simply do not have it.
Okay.
All right, going down. Lost track here. Hang on, bear with me. Yeah, the grounds contract is going up $134,000, and basically that is to take care of the perimeter and also take care of land in phase 3, or the newer part of the land that they have been maintaining but not charging us for. But the bulk of it is the perimeter. On the perimeter, we did receive, we'll talk about plant replacement in a minute, but there were 2 related proposals. One was to clean up the perimeter, and then one was to maintain it. To clean the perimeter up was $30,000 one-time cost, and then to maintain it was $7,000 a month. And we negotiated to where we did not have to pay the $30,000. They ended up throwing it in because of the increase in the contract. Was just able to get them to agree not to do it. One of the other caveats was they have until February 1 to do it, and the February 1 comes into, my first thought process was trying to save $37,000, meaning have him do the cleanup in January, my first thought process was to save $7,000, and that was to have him do the cleanup in January, and we wouldn't start the $7,000 maintenance until February. And then when I asked them if they would do that for us, I asked them if they could do that for us for free in January, and then he came back and said if he can start now in a cleanup and have until the end of January to finish it, he would give us that. So that was the negotiation there.
Let me ask you another question. I saw the Calypso Park cleaning up the perimeter of that. Shouldn't that be in that same cleanup? I mean, that's part of the common area, and I don't see why that should be a separate item.
Just the labor and intensity of the Calypso Park
Well,
cleanup.
It's part of the general. It was in the general contract. Calypso Park is general areas. Why shouldn't that be included? Why was that now an add-on to clean that up?
Well, I mean, I've got a price.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Don, you're talking about those add-ons on almost the last page there of all
I'm
the.
talking about, yes, I am.
Yeah, I'll get to
And
that, too.
I think that is, if that's a perimeter cleanup, that should be in the same perimeter cleanup. I don't see why that's different. It's common area. It should have been taken care of all along.
I will ask them to give us that for free, but the answer is that they did not include that scope in the 30,000. So if we would have, if they would have said, okay, yes, we agree with you, the price would have been 32,800.
Well, the 2017 Hartford contract included taking care of the perimeter. And then somewhere along the line, that was taken out of the contract. That's only been 2 years. So I don't see why we're having to pay extra to clean up. I think it should be maintained as part of it should already be at a $450,000. All those things should be included.
How much of the 33% is cleanup as opposed to maintenance?
$30,000 is the cleanup.
And just maybe to answer, I saw Allison, the landscape chair, raised her hand, maybe to.
I'm not sure what you're talking about with the Calypso thing. Is that the cleanup of the invasive?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, maybe from a landscape point of view, but from a perspective, it's not working. it should be a common area. I just don't understand why, you know, all of a sudden it's terminology and, well, this is just a little close to the water or something. You know.
There's a bunch too, just along those lines that are listed in that, you know, which we'll get to, I'm sure as Jerry goes in there, but there's like $100 and some odd thousand that are outside of the budget. So, and I agree, maybe that if it's lake invasives, and I unfortunately haven't been in the loop with that, but I don't know if it's lake invasives that should have been covered in a bank cleanup or maybe by our lake vendor. So where did that fall through the cracks and why?
That's the quarry, so that's a bigger, there's not as much lake from our lake maintenance company doing that particular one because it's 6 feet deep
Right.
and it's natural and it's not.
But how did that, again, like you said, how did it fall through the cracks, you know?
Well,
What?
exactly. I mean, I just, all these things that, you know, we've been paying for a common area landscape company, and now it's going up from 300,000 to 450,000, and we're still having add-ons. You know, at this price, I'm expecting it all to be covered.
Can't disagree.
So we're looking at, after you back out the 30,000 for cleanup, we're looking at roughly a 25% increase in our landscaping contract.
That's correct.
And is
Well,
that
and
solely
just to
based on the
clarify-
perimeter?
Just to clarify, that $30,000 is separate from that 138 increase. The $30,000 is a one-time cleanup that's not included in the cost of the contract.
Okay, so then we're at 33% increase. And is that solely based on the maintenance of the perimeter? What else are we adding to this contract?
Allison, can you help? Yeah, phase 3 that's been being done for free for the past couple of years.
I guess I don't understand for free. Either we have a contract or we don't. It's my understanding that the HOA has obligations for common area. I think it's a natural assumption that that contract would include all areas of community property. So are we saying that's not the case?
Yep, so I would characterize it as cost-saving measures from previous administrations and not being able to, you know, just wanting to keep the landscaping costs down. There was negotiations with the landscape company in that regard.
Could you expound upon that a little bit in terms of what the cost savings measures were? I assume one of them was the perimeter fence.
Yep, so you've got just what we've talked about. We've got the perimeter that hasn't been maintained. We've got phase 3 that hasn't been paid for. And then tree trimming, I think, was the other big line item. We really need about, I think it's around 130. I've got it in the landscape. A la carte
But that's
item.
not in the 450.
No, but he's asking me more of a general question that expands beyond the
Well,
contract.
he's asking why it went up 33%.
So
it looks
Jerry, are you saying that the cost savings actions that the prior board took was to opt out of doing required maintenance?
Required as to their definition of required. I mean, that's a little bit relative.
Maintain the standard that we were used to when Bonita Bay was here.
They chose to cut back on our standards to save cost.
Well, that's one way to say it, but I would tell you that the landscape contract's the biggest contract
Right.
the association has, and if you need to save money, that's where you would look to start saving
So,
money.
but the question begs to be asked, it was being done, but it was done for free, so, call a spade a spade. Somebody had to get something for nothing, and why can't we continue the free stuff? What makes this board see it any different? Why can't we ask it to be done for free again? Because obviously, there was something previously that was negotiated that I'm certainly not privileged to, but I'd love to save $130-some thousand for the residents and get the stuff for free. So, you know, it's got to be brought out to light. What was going on, we need to know as a board to I need to know as a board member to make a decision on as we go forward. If it was done for free before, why can't it be done for free again? And I know you may not have the answer, but, you know, there's people who are sitting here who signed off on things and may have an idea. It needs to be brought out. Why was it done for free? Why was that, you know?
And to ask the question more specifically, at least from my perspective, are there standards that are changing within the contract? For instance, maintaining weeds, lawn maintenance? Because from some of the meetings I've been in, the term was, if it's green, it's good. Therefore, essentially, if there's weeds in place, as long as you don't see black spots of grass, dead areas, it was a go. So what I'm asking is, have we redirected our landscaping company in a direction to maintain a basic standard that was not in existence before?
Yeah, we're in the process right now. We started about 6 weeks ago, writing a new specs for a new contract.
So that likely will add to the increase.
Yeah,
Is that fair to
absolutely.
say?
Absolutely.
So in addition to the perimeter fence, the phase 3 and the tree trimming, we're also raising the maintenance standard that was previously in existence. So we're no longer in a position where if it's green, although a weed, it goes. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say moving forward, but there were some damages done because of that standard prior that is in, some of it's in our a la carte items. For instance, turf replacement will handle exactly what you're saying. I believe it's a $65,000 bid to basically put in turf where there is only weeds, kill the weeds, it's going to be dirt.
Hence the green is
Yeah.
good. Okay, so in addition now to the increasing the standards in terms of treating weeds within the actual turf, and weeds, I would assume, in the flower beds would be done at a more consistent manner. Is that fair to say?
We're working on that, but yes, but we're working on a
Okay,
spec right now.
So that would be an increase. And also,
Well, Ron, hold on. I don't think it's increasing. I think it's just returning to the standard that we previously had that someone chose to back away from. They lowered the standards, and we're trying to put them back to where they should be.
and also the increase in the contract would be to clean up the areas that were not addressed. Because obviously, if you're not maintaining, it will degrade, and that area will need to be fixed in order to go forward.
Those are in the a la carte items,
That's in the a la carte items, okay.
except for the 30,000 which we've received.
Okay, let me make a statement here. Scott, I don't think it's a fair thing to say that the previous board is responsible for everything. I believe that during the downturn, when Bonita Bay still was here and they could not afford to do all of the things and then went belly up, the first thing that my understanding was that it was landscaping, and that the areas that they had spent a fortune on, they backed down, and that went on for a number of years. Once we as a community took over from Taylor Morrison, who was not interested in bringing the standards up, there was a drastic change in the level of service and how the community was brought back up. We're still in that process of bringing back up. Decisions undoubtedly were made not by the board to say, don't trim that, we don't know, we're not going to pay for this, we're not going to pay for that. That was never brought to the board in any previous board meeting that I have ever been to, nor was it discussed in front of me in any private conversation. I believe that the standards have certainly risen, and they should continue to rise, but to say that the previous board sat here and decided not to do things is not the case.
So who made the decision not to do the perimeter?
I have no idea.
That
but I would-
decision was
A
made.
lot of the perimeter wasn't even there. I mean, 3 years ago, there wasn't much in phase 3. And, I've been involved with several homeowners that, out in phase 3, they said, I've got dead trees along the fence and back. Who's going to take care of that? And I would come in and talk to Sean, and I told him, I've got a homeowner that's complaining, who's going to take care of the trees? And he'll say, I'll have Crawford take care of it, whatever. But the neighbor next door on either side, they didn't get that kind of
He's
treatment.
gonna be
So it
meeting
was
with
just
Jim in
very
the house.
spottily
Yes,
taken care of
those two are the only people that are meeting.
by Sean, as far as, and
Everybody else has to
I
be at
asked the
this meeting.
question
Meeting was
many times.
rescheduled, and we had no choice. I told
Is
Jim
this
yesterday.
HOA property? Who mows, somebody else mows their yard, but the back 3 feet of their property, who takes care of that? Is that HOA? And then on the other side of the fence, A lot of times that's, they had to come in and trim all that. And then the South Florida Water District said, you know, this all has to be maintained to a certain degree, and now we're taking care of that. And like I said, 3 years ago, we weren't doing that. So there's, I'm not saying all of this is that, but quite a bit of it is.
Well, 3 years ago, we were doing, my understanding was in the contract to do, for instance, Surfside. So there had to be a decision to say we are no longer going to do Surfside, and yet I'm hearing that no decisions were made. So it's hard for me to understand how a unilateral decision could be made to back out an area of common maintenance. Now, not only are we adding this to the contract now, that seemed to be part of the contract, but we also have to clean up that entire area. So you're getting hit twice here. And I keep hearing that no decisions were made here, and I just don't understand how that takes place.
I can tell you from my conversations, I don't have factual knowledge, but from my conversations, I believe the decision was not in a board meeting from the board of directors. My belief is it came from the general manager. Now, where that general manager got his marching orders, I don't know, but I feel comfortable it came from the general manager and not from the board as a whole.
Well, would you also say that this trend in decline didn't begin last year? It began when our board consisted of 2 Taylor Morrison employees and Bill Browning. That board started the decline,
I do not know.
and it just continued on.
Well, and again, this is not to get, but I, you know, let's all not forget that I used to be the chairman of Landscape. So, you know, I have pretty much privileged information on all this, and I will, to your question, yes, absolutely. Because I saw how handcuffed I was because of the backdoor doings of that seated board, what they decided and decided not to do, where our budget was $300,000 and it was just maintain. We call it in the business, mow, blow, and go. So yes, but the point being is we could, that's all in the past, but let's look at one figure here. We have an a la carte menu that you posted for $184,715 in landscape a la carte, not included in the landscape budget. But if we add that to the proposed additional $134,861, our new landscape budget of the things we want to do comes to $319,611, but our proposed budget is only $325,000, or 2019 budget $325. So really, we're looking at almost a 50% increase in the landscape budget if we include the a la carte stuff.
And I
think
don't
to be
even
more accurate, you should, it would be analogous to plant replacement line item, not the landscape contract. Because all of those a la carte items would come under plant replacement, which is an annual $60,000. You still make the point, but I'm just saying it wouldn't increase the landscape contract.
Right,
It would
but
increase the
aggregate,
Yeah.
we're still talking.
Well, and I think the biggest difference there, the landscape contract is a recurring, and that's why you wouldn't put it there. But the plant replacement, that number changes every year depending on needs.
Right.
And that's even if the a la carte menu is complete, because this is definitely a reduced list of wants and needs. There's been discussions with landscaping about what was recommended by our own landscaper to do to our entrances to make it look more clean and neat and uniform. That's not on here either, and part of that is a cleanup. Is my understanding, and that's not even offered as an option. So the list we do have, although it's extensive, in my mind is incomplete.
Yeah, there was a much bigger list of items that was originally drawn up, and it's not on this sheet here. There was priority 1, priority 2, quite a bit. And I will also make one other comment, is that when Crawford was picked as the landscape company, the board membership was told that it was to raise the standards of landscaping, not to make it less. So, you know, when everyone says that the board did this, it is not. These are not board decisions that you need to blame. The board did not make those decisions.
And I think the reasoning behind the question is why all of a sudden are the costs so much more now?
I know,
And
I
that's the
agree. I'm
impetus.
shocked, I'm astounded.
It's
really.
not this, that's the true impetus behind the question, is the why.
You said there was like an A, B, or C you just alluded to, or a, in this list here?
Allison has a list of.
So that was recently done.
she's
It was
recently
sent to
done-
all board members on your first draft of the budget under the landscape contract. I've got it right here, all three. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's under the landscape tab.
What we were saying was there was an additional list that was much more extensive.
It's
Any-
in the budget. So what happened was the à la carte items were reduced to consider for the 2020 budget. But the full list of items is still in your landscape tab on the budget spreadsheet. And it's options 1, which I've made corrections on mine to where all of option 1 are included in the 2020. Option 2 are not, and option 3 are not, and I wouldn't say options. They're under priorities. I asked Allison.
Are the
I asked-
entrances included in any list?
Or the what?
The entrances?
Yeah, so I will go over the list for the benefit of the audience. And number 1, which is included in the budget, Phase 3 interior perimeter cleanup, 6,712. Storm damaged trees, 2,000. Master perimeter cleanup, 30,000, which we got that included for free. Calypso Park removal of trees, $525. So the total of that's $36,000. Then we have in number 2, miscellaneous annual plant replacement, $18,000, and that was just to shore up the annual amount proposed in the 2020 budget for annual plant replacement, and that's not things from the past. That's things that are occurring. Second, Calypso Park Lake invasive removals, $2,800. Calypso Park line of sight, $1,700. Water Park slide and fence line, $2,500. Replace I can't ever pronounce this word. ARECA''S at Clubhouse.
Eureka's.
Eureka's. 2,225. Brightside entrance enhancement, $1,500. Ashbury entrance shrub replacement, $900. Esplanade line of sight in bushes at Wynwood to Greendale, $1,700. Belleville entrance plant replacement, $90. Moving 21 baby royals, 3 baby canaries, 4 baby coconut palms, $9,000. 90-foot shrub bed cleaned up, $5,000. Surfside sidewalk, turf plant replacement irrigation, $47,000. And turf replacement for the areas we were talking about earlier with the weeds, $65,000. And then in option 3, Pine Island Gate approach palm trees, $75,000. Add 4-foot buffer to the Esplanade, $23,000. Esplanade bare bed plant replacement, $12,000. Flagpole area plant replacement, $8,000. Mexican petunia invasives bed replacements, $50,000. And then below that, this isn't really plant replacement, it's more tree trimming. What the standard we should have is $130,000 divided over 3 years, which is $43,333. And if you reduce the $15,000 we already have in the budget, we're looking at needing $28,333 to make that whole for a 3-year plan for the tree trimming.
Jerry, can I ask that list that you just read off, who was tasked or who took care of providing that
The
list to you?
landscape committee.
The landscape committee. Okay, just so you know, I am the landscape liaison, and I knew nothing about anything until I saw it from you. I asked you numerous times to carbon copy me on anything and everything with meetings. I have not had one iota of information given to me except when you had, after this was all culminated and given to me. So obviously there is, when I asked once or twice, I could see it as I'm sorry, but this is probably the 6th or 7th time I've asked to be included in this, and I have not been, and that is totally unacceptable. And if there's a reason why I have been excluded from this and other board members know about this, I would love to know why, or you could take me off as the landscape liaison, and I could devote my time to something else. But to just simply omit a board member from a task that they were charged with, you know, is unacceptable. Because I'm sure there were other board members here that were privy to all this, or maybe had even had their hands in this, so in coming up with this. So why I wasn't, I'd love an answer.
There was no specific reason you weren't.
Okay.
So
Right.
the entrances aren't included on this, but it was raised in the past as a important item. Is there anything else that is deficient in this list? Is there any other options that are out there that we just wasn't conveyed or discussed with the board?
This is all I know of. Next line item. Joint cost, that's the wash from the revenue, 21,540. Plant replacement, 45,237. That represents $3,000 a month of regular plant replacement, and plus the option one a la cartes that we just discussed. Tree trimming is $15,000. I just discussed that as well. Really, to get to our standard, I think we need 28,333, but this will help us get there. Under grounds annuals, there was a higher number there, and it was $2,500 3 times a year at all 3 gates, and also at the clubhouse. What we decided to do was to back that out, put $10,000 in for plant replacement that are perennials, not annuals, and so it'll be so we don't have to keep changing that out every season. And then sprinkler maintenance, 36,000. Again, that's backing out what we were spending last year on the neighborhoods. Lake aeration maintenance, that's a contract number, 5258, and that includes Somerville. Storm drainage maintenance, $15,000. It represents the cleanouts from Sewer Viewer we just completed. We'll be doing that at the end of the first quarter of next year. We won't wait so late in the year. Moving down, next items I've highlighted are 4 items that we combined that I split out. Pool equipment, pool repairs, pool supplies, and pool contract. If you add up all those numbers, let me add them up for you real quick. Thank you. So that represents 57,000. So if you add up the projections for the pool supplies, which included the contract, basically I separated the contract out from the supplies, the repairs, and the equipment.
The contract prior was an employee, and we eliminated an employee and added the contract, correct?
Correct.
It was the employee plus the cost of the pool supplies.
Under Halloween, that's a wash line item as well. There's 6,000 of revenue and 6,000 of expense. That number was reduced after, at first I think it was 12,000 in there. It remains a wash. The board wants to discuss Halloween at this point, whether we want it as a wash or we want it as a expense line item, what our threshold is. I'm willing to take guidance.
Well, just to be clear too, from what I was told, that the original calculation that was explained to us was incorrect, that justified the increase. There were, I don't know how this happens, frankly, how there's multiple duplicate receipts to justify an increase, and then it increases, and then when we ask, we're told, oh, there was a mistake. It was actually a lot less. That's the history.
Well, on the first one, I take responsibility. On the first one, I had staff members add up the invoices to give me a number. And then when this became a stronger issue, I took charge of it, looked at the invoices, and found there was some redundancy. So once I crunched the numbers, we found the exact number of ticket sales by the number of wristbands we purchased. And our expenses, basically, if we charge $4 a wristband, there would be like a under $100 positive variance. So that's basically the break even is $4. And we initially thought it would be 5.
And is that including the, I believe there's like is it correct, a 60% increase in police presence this year?
Yeah, I mean, if we want
About
to, we want to
40%?
talk about what we talked about, or do we
Yeah.
want to? So, again, when I first saw the video of the 5% or $5 increase and the numbers that were thrown out there, I kind of said to myself, well, listen, I don't know if that's true or not, because in subsequent years, the previous GM and I had worked together to come up with numbers because of my 25 years in public service and doing large-scale events. He asked me about, what we need, and I looked at these numbers and I said to Jerry, hey, listen, I have experience in this. Let's sit down. Maybe we can come up with some real facts and figures, and what we need and what we don't is my previous experience. And I also asked a lieutenant from Lee County Sheriff's Officer who handles all of their large-scale events to give us his opinion. And we sat down and we came up with some things that, where we may or may not need, what we may need, and where we want placement. So I feel confident in knowing that what the recommendation was, that we will have sufficient coverage for the event. But I did notice there's a couple things, the options that are out there. I'm still under the impression that the $600 EMS fee that's in there, they're just a roving EMS. They are not a transport EMS. So if in fact somebody needs to be transported, they're still going to have to activate the 911 system, wait for an ambulance to show up to transport that person. So every police officer in the state of Florida is trained at a first responder, first aid level. So all of your officers that are out there can handle anything until a BLS or an ALS unit, basic life support or advanced life support unit, arrives. So we can back that $600 EMS figure out there, in my opinion, and also Lee County Sheriff's. And I think it's, again, staffing. When you talk about large-scale events and you talk about staffing large-scale events, you look at your span of control and what you need to do based on the amount of people. And I am very confident in putting the numbers out there as 12 officers and 1 supervisor. At 12 officers and 1 supervisor, for that one day of the year, you will have more police in Sandoval than you have on a normal day in Cape Coral covering this sector. So, you could but what if incidents all day long, but knowing that that one day at 12 and 1, we are staffed way more than on a regular day if you would call 911 and say you have a burglar in your house waiting for a police officer to arrive. So I'm confident, and I think the Lee County Sheriff's Officer, Lieutenant, is confident in 12 and 1, no EMS. And again, lighting is a safety issue, but would also Lee County Sheriff's Office advise they would try to avail to us would also be, if you guys have seen before, they're called scissor stations, where they have the, it's basically a scissor jack, and on top of the scissor jack it says Lee County Sheriff's Officer. It's all blacked out, and they usually put an officer in there. They would give us 2 of those to put in strategic locations, and also if we needed to have someone either on bike or like a gator or something like that. So I'm awaiting a proposal from them to give to you to pare this down. I totally, in my professional opinion, believe that those are safe numbers to cover the community by and have safety, and I think doing that, I don't think we would incur a wristband price increase from the $3. That's still to be seen, but I believe those numbers will come in a lot less than the $12,000 that we've had before.
I think it's important to note that last year's event had 12 to 14 officers on site. There was vandalism of about $5,000 to the fence, and there's a lawsuit currently pending. And with all that, and the lawsuit is attesting to the fact that there wasn't proper security on site. So not only did this cost us, the cost of the wristbands and the cost of the police, it's cost us the repair of the fence. It's also cost us a potential increase of $15,000 in our liability insurance policy. So, there's other costs involved in this project and in this particular event than the lights and the security that's on site. So I think all those things, need to be taken into consideration and pointed out, when we're talking about what the event costs the community.
Let me say something also here in that this does not cost any member of this community a dime. All of the children and all of the families that are here don't pay a wristband charge. Those are for outside invited guests.
Well,
And last year, I have the figures in front of me that we were in the hole last year, $2,013.65, and a suggested band charge for 2019. This was produced last year. Was to raise the band for 2019 to $5. This was not a Molly Knott suggestion. This was a suggestion from those involved last year. We also, it was discussed during the neighborhood rep meeting and brought up, which was a very good suggestion, that the wristbands be numbered. And so when they are given out to your family, you purchase, say, number 422 to 429. So if one of your guests is involved in an altercation, as happened last year, you will know whose guest that was. And a guest is a responsibility of a homeowner. And when wristbands are sold this year, it was suggested that the homeowner sign that they've received these particular set of numbers and that they are responsible for their guests. That reduces the liability for our community. But by doing that, the wristband cost is going to go up slightly for that amount. But your time involved in ensuring that all of this happens and the sale of all these is going to increase because it's a more laborious situation. But the fact that we're in a lawsuit right now over something that happened during Halloween, and to reduce the number of people, to me is very illogical. In addition, last year we did not have the gate at phase 3 at all. That was sealed off. We still had people climbing around a fence there last year. Now we have a gate there. So we really have to station more people in that area. We didn't have the numbers of people in the apartments that are now there. Not to say that they are someone who is going to do something illegally, but it is a chance for more people to come in. I can't see keeping something that, this is a wash through. This is not costing us at all. This is costing a guest to come in. I'm more inclined to go with a higher number than to decrease the number of police officers.
And I would,
If I could just interject real quick, I'm sorry. In terms of paying for the wristbands, it's my understanding most residents will wind up paying. They're the ones that are going and purchasing it. For example, my daughter, she'll invite a couple of her friends from 2nd grade, and we'll pay for her and her parents, and because she's an only child and she's not trick-or-treating alone. So I think that's a bit of a fiction to say simply because they're not residents, the residents will not incur the cost. In terms of litigation, we have multiple lawsuits going on right now that are unrelated to Halloween. I think it's cherry picking a bit to simply say we had one lawsuit on Halloween, therefore there's a correlation. In terms of vandalism, I believe what we're referring to is the wall. There's been 2 other incidences, have nothing to do with Halloween, of the same type of, I guess, vandalism. And in terms of what I'm concerned here is the process, because I specifically raised this to Jerry just to have a discussion about it. And then all of a sudden I find out all these decisions have been made. I was completely cut out of the loop. I would have liked to talk about this. And I show up at a liaison meeting and I'm told, hey, this is the way it is. And I hear a lot of board members getting involved in this and not allowing the board to have a true discussion. I thought those days were over.
I got a question.
Who got involved in it?
We also have a
What board
lawsuit
members
pending
What board
for-
members were involved in this? I personally was not involved in this at all. If anybody else, were you involved,
No.
Marilyn? Were you involved, Al?
I
Were
was
you
told Molly
involved?
was involved.
I was involved. I was
Okay,
asked
so it's
for
not a lot
historical,
of board members being involved. That's
Okay.
not true.
I was asked for historical knowledge, and that's what I brought forward, was historical knowledge.
were the
And I
numbers-
brought forth this piece of paper that suggested from last year's treasurer and committee that was working on this together, I am told, suggested the ban charge. I did not create
Who
this
suggested the
document.
ban?
This was presented in the, as of last year's receipts, last year's costs, and that it was $2,013.65 in the whole.
Who suggested the ban increase? You just said there was a specific committee, specific people
I
that
said there were,
recommended.
this was undoubtedly, this came from the treasurer from last year.
So the treasurer requested, from last year, requested the ban increase.
This
So that's
was,
what I'm
this
hearing?
was their after-action report on it that
When-
suggested a ban change for 2019.
When was that presented?
I asked for this, Jerry asked me a question on how much it costs and how it was run, and I said I will ask for the information. I called Hennigan and asked him. He in turn asked Don Swindell to pull all the information, and then this was presented to me.
Why aren't
That's
we
why-
using our treasurer, our current
So-
board-elected treasurer? This is ridiculous.
So we used,
Absolutely ridiculous.
those numbers came from
Last
Frank
year's,
Hennigan and Don Swindell and nobody else that we know of?
And the rest of the board was completely cut out from any discussion whatsoever.
And were,
I
do
was
those-
simply asked by
were-
the GM to, if
But-
what we had any historical knowledge on it, and this is what I provided, because this is what I was given.
Are those numbers the numbers from before Jerry discovered the duplicate invoices?
So they provided the inaccurate numbers?
This is exactly what I provided to
Were
Jerry.
those,
I don't recall that. I mean, I just don't. I recall
you found,
the
mat-
day that Molly was in the office, staff pulled up previous invoices, scurrying to do it. We were in a hurry
Yeah.
for the neighborhood rep meeting the next day. And I don't particularly, I mean, that may have been a part of it. I just don't remember.
But I think the point here is that you took the proactive position as to, okay, let's see what we have. You went out and you sought the advice of two subject matter experts who sat with you and gave their opinion, not somebody who was sitting on a committee who does not have years of experience in large-scale incidents. You got their opinion, and now it's the board's task to either say, I'm going to create my own opinion, and I'm not a subject matter expert, or I'm going to listen to the subject matter experts, and we're going to say we're going to staff it the way the subject matter experts say it should be staffed, or we're going to put 500 police officers in here, and you're still going to have the possibility of something going wrong. So, you can prepare, and you can staff, and you can do all of your logistics, but in the end, if somebody's going to jump the fence, they're going to jump the fence no matter how many police officers you have here. You're going to try and mitigate it, but there's a number that you need to come up with, and that number comes from people who have run large-scale events, not somebody who is just pulling a number out of their hat. So, that's where I think you did the right thing by asking an expert. And unless anybody else on the board here has, 25 years of experience staffing large-scale events, I appreciate your input. But unless, I think you need to listen to the GM and the either the Cape Coral Police or the Lee County Sheriff's Office. They're going to provide you however many you want. But I died.
Well, what is the GM's recommendation? I'm not clear on this. What is the current
Came out
recommendation?
yesterday.
So I think everybody received the email yesterday. I crunched the numbers and listed three options. At $3, we'd have, I don't have it in front of me, it's a $1,200 or $1,300 loss. At $4, it was about break even. And at $5, we'd have about the same $1,200 or $1,300 cushion.
And that was staffing at
That was
this level?
No, it was 2 additional officers.
2 additional
So it was
officers.
16 officers.
So if we went with the recommendation for the staffing level at $3, we would still make a profit.
I
'Cause you'd have
haven't
2
crunched that number. It'd be
Okay.
It'd be close to a break even.
Okay. But,
If you back EMS out, again, that's a $600 cost, and again, that's something that, just so the board knows, that EMS is not a transport EMS, it's just a on-scene treatment, thank you. An on-scene treatment, which again, all Florida law enforcement officers are trained to a basic first aid level. Police cars, whether it's LCSO or Cape Coral, have AEDs in their police vehicles. So that's a cost there that I feel is not warranted cost, the $600.
And-
So again, I think you can look at each officer, $350 on average. So you save about $1,400 from going to the proposed 16 to 12.
so it'd be a break even at $3.
About a break even.
And-
Then if you took the $600, you did away with the EMS, then you would have that profit.
And just to give the board an idea, this wasn't something that was just, when the three of us sat in the office, Jerry's got that great big picture of the community on there, and we looked at historically where the bulk of the people, of course, we know they're going to come in the main gate because that was going to be our choke point, and then as we go down the boulevard, the amount of people start to diminish as you get to basically the Stony Hill area. Phase 3, as you know, you probably get 0 if you're lucky. So we would have, and lucky because you don't have to spend $1,000 on candy, but you're looking at keeping a roving officer in that area. We were concerned about the wall and the damage that was done to the wall, so we were going to staff 3 officers at strategic locations at the perimeter fence. So we did not have the wall jumpers where we had. So there was going to be 3 out of the 13 detailed to that area. The rest would have been you would have almost 1 officer at every intersection of every neighborhood, and then a floater in the far area of Phase 3, and also a floater over here. So you had a high concentration from Veterans Gate to about Stony Hill, 1 every. Then you had the floating in Phase 3 and Phase 3, and then you had a supervisor who would also be floating, and then 2 people on bicycles in that number. So if you looked at it as a map, when you put those people strategically in those areas with their scope of work, it was very concentrated in those areas. So that's where that number came up with, and again, so you had a better idea of how the event was going to be staffed.
Well, and also one of the reasons they talked about increasing it was the lawsuit. We have is not the largest lawsuit we have for an altercation that took place at a non-Halloween?
I have to say, I don't think that was a reason for increase.
Okay.
I think that was a reason not to decrease,
Okay,
but I think the reason for increase was the Pine Island Gate.
okay. Well, I guess my other question is, why is Halloween different than the other 5860 events?
In what way? Why is it different?
Why has it got its own line item? What,
Specifically.
Shouldn't we have-
Specifically because of this issue. I mean,
Okay.
I wanted it clear whether it was going to break even or, I needed clarity.
So
but
it's not
but
considered a
I would
social
think
event?
if we're gonna break Halloween out, then 5860 should be broken out into sub-accounts for everything that covers and have a budget for them.
I actually wouldn't mind that. I think that's more of an internal mechanism, though, that feeds
Where we could see where it's
that
been
feeds
spent.
into that one line item.
Yeah.
Like I have separate tabs for some of the other contracts.
That would all come back into
Correct.
that. I think we should have consistency. If we're gonna have one lump sum, that ought to be in the lump. If we're gonna detail, they all ought to be detailed.
I think that from a practical standpoint, like
Are you
versus the
on?
Halloween haunted house,
Yeah.
I'm out. So the
There you go.
Halloween, it's messing up. The Halloween haunted house, that is lifestyle. The Halloween haunted house is included in the lifestyle budget. So why this is a little bit different, probably because I'm handling it, not Libby, and it's out in the community. It's not part of the, so it's a little bit different in that regard. So I think we need to make a decision. I think this is our opportunity with all board members here.
Are we allowed to take an action?
Yes, we can. We have
Well,
a
actually,
quorum.
we're just, okay, I was thinking maybe we just give, because we didn't vote to raise it, we don't need to vote to lower it. We can just give you
I want
advice.
guidance,
We
yeah.
can give you guidance,
Yeah.
and you can make that decision.
Yep. I think that's really good.
Well, I would say we should leave it the same, or at maximum go to $4.
And if I could just say, I'm not concerned with a slight increase presence. I'm not overly concerned with a slight cost increase. What I'm concerned with is the process in which we arrived at those numbers, and I'm very disturbed by that, I'll be honest with you.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, and I think I'm going to say it, there's a political component to this. And the reason I say this is because I haven't been given specific guidance on what I'm about to say, but I mean, we're talking less than, 0.010 of 1% of the budget. And it was, I felt I had the authority to make a decision on that type of a dollar line item. But I think I stepped in it, quite honestly, from a political standpoint. And, I learned from that, and I can assure you it wouldn't happen again. But that's the reason I didn't think twice in making the decision. I think at this point, the board needs to be involved in guiding me towards either maintaining the 5, going back to the 3, or compromising at 4.
Well, I would like to say something in my defense. I happened to be in the office on a completely unrelated manner. And Jerry said, Molly, I'm working on Halloween. Do you have any historical knowledge as to how this goes? And I explained that it was a huge event, and that I did know that we went in the hole. I said, I'll have to go back in my records and look, and I'll get back to you. I went home, I was looking at this, I called Frank and said, I don't have the exact information. I know we went in the hole. Where can it be found? This was provided to me to give to Jerry. I didn't go in and say, we need to raise this to $5. This was what was provided to me. I gave it to him. Any one of us could have been in the office and he might have asked the same question. So to say that I was the one who did all of this the man was asking for historical information. I provided it to him. He made the decision. I didn't make the decision. It's a GM thing. It's always been a GM thing as to how much you charge. It has nothing to do with me. I have no children here to do Halloween with. I've bought candy and brought it to the clubhouse to be distributed other ways. I just happen to live in Phase 3 and we don't get anybody. But I go every year down to the area where all the kids are to watch it go on, and I provide candy for it also. So it has nothing to do with what I personally think. I just provided the information from previous years.
That's what we were looking for, that those numbers were not your numbers. You took them in good faith from someone else and passed
Absolutely.
them on. It's that, were they good numbers or not, and that's questionable.
Well,
You
here are
took it
the
in-
invoices.
Well, no, you took them in good faith and gave them to Jerry.
So let's, maybe if we could just go forward then, and let's just say,
I think-
since we just talked about, and I'm not volunteering you, but since, we were looking at irrigation and you were almost tasked with that, if you take it on or not. I hate taking on another job because I work a full-time job, but if the board would like, I will stick with this and continue to work with Jerry, if that's what the board's wishes, on how we can come up with exactly the wants and needs. And again, as the GM, you're going to have the final say in what you believe is going to be. But if we can come up with the proposal that LCSO is working on, I should have that today, and you could put that in your thing, and then we can come up with and say, hey, listen, here's what the true factual number is going to be based on band sales, and this is the number we need to charge to if the board says either break even or go in a hole or whatever the case may be. But I think there still needs to be a little bit more vetting of what we really need. And again, let that be a final decision that the GM makes based on the information that either myself or we can just get back to you. I think that would be a fair proposal instead of the board just sitting here and trying to hash it over. Task it with someone, do the task. If we know we're at 3, 4, or 5, right? So if whatever it comes out to be, it will come out to be based on true facts and figures and numbers and needs from subject matter experts.
I agree with that, but I think our guidance to Jerry should be we should try to break even. We should not try to make a profit.
Oh, yeah, there shouldn't, agreed. There shouldn't be a profit. I mean, why would we make?
And profit, I heard the word cushion being used, and I agree with it. You know, I don't think we would be looking to profit from it, but we certainly wouldn't want to lose, and there's unknowns when it comes to large-scale events, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Pet stations.
So does everybody agree for Scott to work with me and come up with it, and let's do that this week?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
And Scott, you're more than welcome to, I'll make a copy of this for you.
Yeah, I have.
What I have.
The other thing I would like to mention before we go on from this last thing I would like to mention is that I try to be a sponge. I'm new, and when someone's in the office, a lot of times I'm working on things, and if it's a person like Molly or anybody that's been on the board for a while, or anybody, it could be not even be a board member, I will ask for information. And quite honestly, it just seems like Don and Al, because of their volunteerism, I mean, they're in the office almost daily trying to help either with the gate or whatever. And then I see Molly quite often, and I think that's why I engage them more often. And from my perspective, it's concerning me a little bit. I don't know if I need to just, you know.
I would like to add a comment to what we're talking about right here. You know, we have a general manager. He attempts to do what he thinks a general manager should do. If we as a board member don't agree with that, then right away we're not in the loop and we don't know what's going on here. I mean, we have to make a decision here as a board. Do we want to give him some authority to make some decisions, or do we want to be involved in every micro decision that he makes? And if that's the case, he will have to call every single person to make sure everybody's on the right same sheet of music, and that's why you have a general manager. I think in the city, I think the general manager makes decisions. I think that the board then, you know, attempts to support the general manager instead of tearing him apart because they don't agree with what he said. You know, if we didn't like how this project developed and how it was going, then, you know, next time you can suggest some of these things to him. But right away, everybody has got an opinion and everybody's in there talking to him. Scott, I didn't hear you didn't mention to me that you had an idea. You went right to the manager. You know, if we're involving the board, I think all of us should, you know, be involved, and maybe you've got an idea, and so then we could support what you said. But to just, I mean, I didn't even know that until Jerry tells me that, you know, you were gonna go in there with, you know, one of the residents, and I think our experience in getting residents involved in expansions and in some of these other things has not been so good. So I just think that, you know, we need to make a decision here. I mean, are we going to just tear everything apart every time that, you know, something comes up that we don't agree with, or is there a way that, you know, I'm not informed, and so therefore I'm offended? You know, I'm not informed with everything, but I don't get offended about it. You know, and I'm not admonishing anybody here. I'm just giving you, what do you want Jerry to do? I mean, he's in a precarious situation of where you're stripping him of all of his authority because you want to be in control. And
No,
I don't think that's the case at all.
I think the bigger point here is that a board member was involved and the other board members were not involved. And I think the concern here, and I can give other examples if we really want to get into it, of a board member being involved behind the scenes and other board members finding out after the fact. If we're going to defer to Jerry to make these decisions, then he needs to make them independent of the board entirely, rather than certain board members being able to be in there all the time and influence these decisions. And if we really want to get into some examples, I'm happy to do it.
I think Marilyn should give us an example of how board works with a city manager.
Well, and I was just going to say, it's my understanding that I'm one of 7, and therefore I'll stay out of the office. I'm not employed. I set policy, I attend meetings, and I trust our general manager. And I just don't think, unless he reaches out for a particular issue, as maybe he does with Al because of the knowledge he has, I think board members should stay out of the office.
Second
agree.
motion.
I agree.
Yeah.
And just a caveat to this, whether, I need to be involved in everything, I don't, because I do work a full-time job. But when I am a liaison to a board or a committee, and I am not in the know of anything that goes on, that's when I have the due right to say, I am mad, because I have residents calling me up and saying, what's going on with landscaping, and I don't have an answer. That is not a position that any board member should be put in when they are not in the loop, when they are in fact tasked with being on a committee or a liaison to that committee. So if people feel that I need to know everything, then again, I will step down of every committee that I'm on except for this one, and somebody else could take on those tasks. Because whether you're in the military, the police, or the fire department, there is no room for freelancing. Freelancing gets people hurt, killed, or whatever. So if you're tasked with a job, do your job. If you're tasked with a job, you should be kept in a loop by whomever. And if you're not kept in a loop, somebody has to be held accountable for that.
Ready to move on?
Can we take a 5-minute bathroom break?
Yes. Hang on just a second, don't let that go. Yes, we'll break for 5 minutes. Next line item, we did joint cost, is tree trimming, we talked about that. Grounds annuals, we were just there. Sprinkler maintenance. The 4 line items, we talked about those. Halloween, repairs and maintenance, pet supplies, plumbing, and HVAC. Those were all combined into the pet stations, plumbing, and HVAC was separated out of repairs and maintenance. And then going down to miscellaneous, this is the transfer of the bulk telecommunications amount. And then 2 line items down, we had security cameras. That is being paid out of the larger Envera bill, which we'll see in a moment. Under utilities, reserve from closings is 0, obviously. That related to the resales, new home sales. And then under utilities, you can see the bulk telecommunications invoice, $930,000. That's pretty flat. And then telephones was separated out. That was a really large number. And so I separated internet gates from telephones. So you can see that phones coming in at 3780 is more of a realistic number. And then the internet gates is 2 internet providers per gate. We use CenturyLink, but we have redundancy with Comcast in case CenturyLink goes down.
Jerry, on trash disposal, is Waste Pro the only game in town to do that, or are we able to bid that out?
I can bid that out.
Not that it's a big number, just wondering,
That would just be the bulk one.
But yeah, the
not out of
dumpster.
the yard, if
Correct.
the
That's
city.
correct.
Yeah.
Can I throw out that the city may be, if they cannot come to terms, which I found out I found out yesterday that if the city cannot negotiate adequately with Waste Pro, then the city will be going out for an RFP. Because right now, Waste Pro is asking for a 16% increase, which is just out of sight. I mean, if it'd been 5%, they probably would have gotten it, but through negotiations, if it doesn't happen, the city too will be going for an RFP.
One thing I've done in previous communities that I just haven't had the time to roll up my sleeves and consider it here is that we've had other communities that have contracted their own residential trash service and were reimbursed by the city entity or the county, depending who provided the service for that. And so I'm going to be talking to the city about that possibility as well. It's not included as part of the budget just because we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But have you heard of another community doing that?
No.
The
I
city
haven't.
buying them out? Okay.
No.
Have you seen, you said you've seen that before?
I've worked with it twice.
Was there an appreciable savings for the community?
Yes, there was. And more control and a little bit of a savings too. So it's worth looking into. So the total variance for the utilities, because of differences in breaking things out, he says 5281. So we're relatively flat on utilities. So that leads us to the bottom line, basically, and we're at a 8% increase with the proposed budget. And then further down below, you'll see all of the a la cartes. I did put in my version, the newest version, I have $700 in savings. So I'll put that in a needs to balance the budget line item. $700 is a lot of money, but anyway, I guess at this point we need to talk about a la carte items. That also includes a contingency. I wanted to talk about that. In an earlier draft, I actually had up to 36,000, then it went down to 24,000, 12,000, and then ultimately 0. Just because I came across areas that we had to have money, and so contingency was the easiest thing to take out. Nevertheless, as you might recall, we had a visit from our auditor a few months ago, and there was a need to, or a recommendation, to have 3 to 6 months of operating in our account as surplus. it's a lot of money. I mean, we're talking, you know, $900,000 to have 3 months. And I think the contingency, whether we start it this year or next year, is something that we must do either this year or next year. I put $24,000 as the cost for that. It can be whatever number the board wants, but I think it should definitely be considered.
Can I just interrupt for a second on this? Our auditor, is it correct to say, recommended between 3 and 6 months operating backup cash?
That's correct.
And this auditor was in place prior to this board taking,
This what?
prior to this current board being
That's correct.
seated, correct? And so how much would be 3 months? How much backup cash are we talking at 3 months?
Let me, I'll tell you right now. And it's an average.
I had it in the neighborhood of 1.2.
Yeah, so 300, 900 is where I had it about, yeah.
Okay.
I'll figure this out real quick, in just a second. Yep, it would be equals this times 3. It'll be just over $1 million.
So over $1 million. And how much do we currently have in backup cash?
In the 30s. 1,052,000 and change.
1,052,000 to be on the low end of what our auditor recommended. We currently have how much?
39,000.
We're over $1 million short. That's for 3 months. Marilyn, do you know what the city?
Yeah. The city strives for three months, and it gets close. But I would say normally somewhere around 2.8 months, something, you know, it's never at, I shouldn't say never at 3, because it might be budgeted at 3, but it doesn't stay there.
Is it ever at a couple weeks?
I'm sorry.
Does
what?
it ever go as low as a couple weeks?
Oh, no, no. It's never been below 2.
2 months?
The other a la carte line item that was added is Pine Island signage at $12,500.
Have you talked yet to the MPO or to the, you know, Pine Island Road, State Road? So is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but this is just a budget number.
Okay.
Just in case we're able to
Able
do
to
those
do it.
logistics, right?
So the question is that I have is if we added up all of the a la carte menus, like I said before, it's almost $185,000 that's outside of the budget. If we were to say yes to all of those, would you add that to the 8% increased budget, or would you pay that out of CenturyLink, or excuse me, telecommunications surplus fund?
That's a board decision. I mean, you can do what you.
Are you thinking about raising the HOA fee 8% or some percentage of HOA fee increase and then a certain percentage coming out of the telecommunications fund to get to the 8%?
Great question. I think that's what was put
Well,
before us.
I think the answer to your question is it would be added to the budget. At that point in time, then we, the board, have to decide how we're going to fund it.
Correct.
Right.
Just so I understand where we are, before we get to that question, in terms of the a la carte, the recommended entry for the operating backup cash, where would that put us if we follow your recommendations in terms of how many months we would have in operating backup cash if we followed your a la carte recommendation?
How many months?
Yes.
Well, there's nothing in there for contingency, so it wouldn't change
It
it.
wouldn't change contingency.
We're looking at a break-even budget right now. So assuming we finish 2019 at break-even, with this budget in 2020, we would still have 39,000.
So there's nothing listed in our operating budget to create some
No.
backup cash as
Not
recommended?
in
It's
this
on the a
budget
la
as
carte.
presented.
And you said that you had pulled the number that you had, that whatever that number was.
Yeah, I've
you
got
weren't
a
gonna put
line
it
item
pulled
in
that
there.
out.
If
Yeah.
you've seen it, it was added under miscellaneous because I originally, in my earlier drafts, had some numbers in there. And as I kept going, and I really probably should have explained this, in determining and making the decision to come in with an 8% budget, that decision, I balanced a few things, and that had to do with, in my history, 3% is a normal increase that's a healthy increase for an association. 5% would generally be the top end of where I would recommend going. This community is in a unique situation, primarily because of the landscape contract and some deferred maintenance, to where I think we need to consider more. Well, then as I'm thinking, what is that threshold, of acceptability, human nature, whatever? Well, 8%, in my opinion, was that point to where I did not think we could go much more than that and keep that acceptability from the general public. And even that is a big stretch. So I created a budget at 8%, and then anything else I thought we needed, if I had all the money in the world, what would I have in my budget? Those were the a la carte items. So probably needed to be said.
Could we discuss a little bit more, though, on the a la carte menu?
Yes.
Because, as the president was saying, Calypso Park, lake invasives, some of these things, I believe, shouldn't be in the a la carte. They probably should have been either handled already in the operating budget or part of the operating budget. But what kind of just tweaks me a little bit here is maybe we can get an answer. Calypso Park line of sight for $1,700. What are we spending? I understand what line of sight for traffic is. Is that what we're talking about, line of sight?
Yes.
Let me go down this list real quick. I've got some explanations that Allison put together for the different line items.
She also had pictures, too.
Is Tracy here? Did you have those printed out, the pictures? It was the second attachment. I sent 2 attachments this morning. Or it wasn't an attachment, you had to click on it. Did you not receive it?
No.
I think the file size was too large. Is what would happen for the photos.
I have them on this computer.
Can
That's
you
not
put it
gonna
up on the
help.
screen for us?
No.
Well, it worked with Allison. Allison put it up on the screen.
This colored one, that's when they're talking about, that was that type that I got. When you took it from one list to another.
Yeah. So what order are we in here? This isn't stapled. So these are all your explanations?
Yeah, this one is the original email, what she put in the
No.
back. Okay, so
Good.
it starts here from what your order. This is-
Okay, perfect.
So this is the first page. Yeah, it went down with.
And
oh, she's going back and forth.
why
This
the
is
three,
last page.
why the 3 columns?
That was what you had sent me in an email. That was your spreadsheet.
The 3 columns?
Yep, all I did was type into your spreadsheet that you sent me.
Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and start down the list and go through each line and read it so you'll have a little bit further understanding. So annual plant replacement, 18,000. Many of our plants are old and will need replacing as they decline. Also, we never know when a species will be hit by a disease pest, leaving a gaping hole in large areas of our community. Annual tree, and so again, that 18,000 is to supplement what we already have in there.
That's what I was gonna-
Yeah,
okay.
it's to supplement that.
So we also used to have, it was like a 3-month, I'm trying to do all these, a 3-month, there was like 50-some thousand dollars in there. If any other board members remember that, we were taking from this 50-some thousand dollar fund a few years ago and allocating that towards plant replacement. Has that money been all used up, or, yes? Okay, that's gone, okay. Yeah.
I think that $50,000 was when we moved from Mainscape, and they had destroyed an awful lot of our plants by
Does this
lack of
continue here?
care.
This continues here?
And that was a $50,000 that we
Okay,
held back
this is
from
just
their
formatting.
last
It just looks
payment.
weird. Okay,
And so
very good.
those plants were ones that were then put in at that
Okay,
time.
thank you.
Molly,
You're right.
there, move your
Yeah, I'll
mouthpiece
just put it
away.
right down here.
Reverberating a
Yeah,
lot.
that's good.
Okay,
Yeah,
that was good,
I had
thank
it
you.
clear out here and I had it out, but I don't think you can hear me
Yeah,
when
we
it's
can.
Yeah.
out this far.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
you can still
can.
hear me?
Yeah.
Jerry, if this is plant replacement, wouldn't that fall under a reserve item?
Well, that's another subject to discuss. There is $50,000 in reserves every 3 years.
That's the money I was talking about.
But we've
Yeah.
used that already.
Yeah,
We should be up
actually,
for
I
another.
have earmarked in my reforecast to use it. I have not physically used it. So what'll happen is, If I can make it through the end of the year without it, then I won't exercise. When I would say exercise, what the process is, I would reclassify an earlier landscape expense from operating to reserves. And I have not executed that reclassification yet, but it is earmarked to be. If you look at my reforecast or my actual in the budget, I think it's like $9,000 is my projection. Well, that's based on using that $50,000.
It's about 16 a year, 16,000.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, but I think it's ordered at 50,000 every 3 years plus
Right.
interest.
Yeah. Yeah, so that, yeah.
So
And I-
is,
And I think.
So,
is that money available for next year?
Right,
no,
it's only in
no,
one
I've
time.
used it. Well,
But
if I don't use it,
if
it
you
is. It
spread
depends
it
on the
out, you
reforecast. I'm
wouldn't
trying
get-
not to use it, but if I need it, it won't be. It's every 3 years.
Every 3 years, and so we've already spent the amount we have in reserves that we could have used for next year? Is that accurate?
No, we don't have any money next year.
We have no money
it
left.
this year, then we
Okay.
have it scheduled for 3 years from now.
Okay, so for the next 2 years, we won't
There's
have,
no money in the reserves.
If he doesn't use it this year, he would have it for next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's no money scheduled
Reserve money that
next
you
year.
don't spend, you don't need, you know, it just kind of slides back.
but what I'm hearing is that we have an allocation for 3 years, and we've spent it in the first year.
No,
Is
I
that not
wouldn't look at
accurate?
it like that. What I'd look at it is, we have an allocation this year for $50,000. Our next allocation is 3 years from now for another, it was
It almost
54,000.
looks like it should be every year, and
Ah,
why
it should
the
be.
other 3 years? Makes no sense.
I agree.
We have to
Yeah.
work within that budgetary constraint. It is what it, we got $16,000, you have $16,000.
I mean, in a reserve item, I don't see why you couldn't just say, I'm going to take a third
I
of this
could.
Yeah,
allocation.
I
could.
agree.
My point, thank you.
Yeah,
I
because
could.
something catastrophic can happen, that you're gonna need
Right.
that reserve in year 2 or 3, and you don't have
So
it.
you've got 50, or you've got 50 minus 16, or 50 minus
Correct, yeah.
32.
Well, and the other
Absolutely.
thing I didn't know is because it wasn't in the description and reserve study, it was just a very bland description of what it can be used for. What I didn't know is what was the real intent of that. I was thinking maybe it was every 3 years littorals, or I didn't know why they would have scheduled it every 3 years. The other thing that seemed odd to me is the amount. I mean, $50,000,
It's
you can't see
statutory.
that.
It's statutory, if I remember correctly.
The 50,000?
For when I was going back to my previous position and working with Sean for the previous GM, I remember it being a statutory thing that you're allowed to take that reserve for plantings over a 3-year period, and that's the maximum, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that that was the maximum allowed for plant replacement.
Wow, I will look into that because to me, that is just nothing.
Well,
You
that's,
can't even
that's
see
again the
50,000.
reason that, you know, years ago, when we were looking at propping numbers up for plant replacement post-hurricane, because as you well know, none of that is covered. So if we get a hurricane that comes through here, none of our landscape is, whether it's insurance or, that's not covered, so you're gonna have that money somewhere.
Right. Next, moving on, thank you.
Regarding hurricanes, though, most HOAs, hopefully not us, but if you have a hurricane, in fact, when Irma went through, they had a special assessment.
Yeah.
We did not need one.
Next line item on the a la carte, annual tree trimming, 29,000. The original tree trimming budget was based on baby oak trees, shady lady trees, fig trees, orchid trees, and palm trees under 12 to 15 inches tall. Our maturing trees need more care, upkeep to keep them healthy and alive. They need to be professionally thinned by an arborist so they do not blow over in a wind or rub each other, etc. It is expensive to deal with them after the fact. We currently have at least 8 very large trees that need cutting, staking at $2,500 a tree, or cut them down and remove them at $625 a tree. With every approaching storm, there could be more. Next line item, Surfside perimeter, 47,000. This is not only an eyesore, but a slip hazard to our families due to their sand runoff under the sidewalk from Trafalgar Gate to Hayden Lane. Next item, turf replacement. I think well, I'll just go ahead and read. There are several areas that have been taken over by invasives that will continue to grow in scope area if not dealt with now, e.g. the Esplanade from Sandoval Parkway to Greendale, most noticeable to casual observers at Brightside. Bermuda turns brown parts of the year, so you might notice it more this way if you're looking for it, as it turns brown. There are other areas that died out in the past and not replaced, most likely due to budget restraints, e.g. Ashbury Circle
Can I take this?
along the Surfside Yes, what do you need it for? Okay. The green area, the green you see are weeds which grow at different rates than turf, so homeowners are looking at unsightly mess most of each week between mowings. There are large portions in Phase 3, also not planted by Taylor Morrison. Again, the green you see are simply mowed weeds. Once we landscape that with palms and shrubs, there is an overwhelming amount of over soft edging from long ago that needs filling in. Just different bullet point explanations of the need for the turf replacement. Calypso Park Lake.
Jerry, on turf
Yes.
replacement, has there been any discussion with Crawford to take responsibility for this? It's my understanding that they're supposed to be maintaining the weeds from the turf. And it sounds like the weeds
Well,
just
it
basically
depends.
went out of
It
control
de-
and killed our grass.
Well, you know, you were involved in that meeting, and I think that question was asked. So I think, you know, and we talked about it afterwards.
They agreed to
actually.
do it for half that cost.
Say again?
At that meeting, they had agreed to replace the turf for half that cost.
Okay.
They said they would do it for $37,000. So they obviously realized that there's some culpability there.
Well, again, a lot of that comes down to, do we care about the relationship with Crawford to the extent of where's that threshold in money? Maybe we're talking too much money. And the reason I say that is because if there were verbal agreements with past administrations to do things apart from the contract terms, how hard do we want to press them to that? If we were to go full bore on that, we would probably just have to understand we're going to lose that relationship. And
Well, another ridiculous statement that was always told to me by the previous general manager was that every plant that Crawford plants has a lifetime guarantee. And that now everyone says that's not true. So, and I find that hard to believe when I was told that in the first place.
I think it's clear that this next contract needs to be much tighter.
No question.
Including a map.
Yeah.
And make sure that everything is clear in terms of responsibilities and expectations.
agree. And again, for the board, we started that process, about 6 weeks. Oh, you were aware of that, that we started the process of the RFP and writing specs for a new contract. So we as a group agree completely that it is a contract that you would not be able to read unless I had background information.
Okay.
So it's,
So it's Crawford's position in response, I'm almost answering my own question, just as a clarity. Is it fair to say Crawford's position was that they were told not to maintain these areas, and now we're inheriting the mess? Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say, and I would assume strongly the conversation went along the lines of, we need to save X amount of dollars, where can we save this? And it was a bigger conversation, and it was decided upon as a group, this is what we'll do. I think that's probably how that rolled out.
When you say decide upon a group, can you expound on that?
I don't
It doesn't
know.
sound
I'm
like it was a group.
Well,
Because I
the
know
group
for a fact
between
Don
two
was
or
shocked
three-
by this.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be specific. The group between the 2 or 3 people that might have been in that meeting, which, again, it would all be assumption because I was not there. I just know because these people don't know.
And that's my point. I
So-
didn't want it implied that the group was comprised of
How do you turn that
people
camera
sitting
on?
at this table.
I agree.
Yeah, no. So how do we turn this on?
Next line item is Calypso
You-
Park
you
Lake
had the remote-
Invasive.
You had the remote for the screen.
It's in the box.
I would have imagined that conversation would have been between the manager of Crawford and the GM. I certainly was never privy to that. Don, were you ever privy to, or Marilyn, or Al, were you ever privy to conversations like that? Do this and don't do that?
I never met the Crawford people till the meeting with Ron and Allison and Jerry.
On the contrary, I never got my questions answered.
I don't know
I
which-
asked questions about the
I
perimeter.
don't know which
Who's
remote it
responsible
is.
for the perimeter? Different sections of the community apparently were taken care of differently. You know, behind Anguilla there was taken care of differently than Phase 3. And I got involved with several residents. That why is my friend's yard taken care of and my yard is not? And so I came to Sean several times and I said, I don't understand. Who's responsible for this? I talked to Ernie Giordano. I said, who's responsible for this? I never got a straight answer from either one. So, and I kept pressing, and every time I'd ask, I never came back with an answer, so.
The next line item would be the, have I gone over Surfside Perimeter?
Yes.
Next line item would be
I think we're just at Calypso Park, 525.
Calypso Park, thank you, lake invasive removals. The Brazilian pepper, as well as many other along the Calypso Park, Barclay Park are out of control. They are tall, encroaching the fences and beyond, and quickly getting thicker quickly, as well as volunteer sable palms coming up through the bottom of our dock. It was $2,800. The next one is the Calypso Park, removal of trees. There are oak trees, mahogany's growing up, into and interfering with our 3 large, very expensive gumbo limbo trees facing Somerville. We do get complaint letters from Somerville residents regarding the unsightliness of this. Our main concern is that they are not in good health and that they are interfering with our 3 specimen trees. Next line item, Esplanade line of sight.
Hold on, Calypso line of sight, if you don't mind. Oh, okay. You're not in the same order we are. No problem.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Under Esplanade line of sight, the notes are these died out sometime in the past. Only some have been replaced. It is the border between their homes and the very busy car traffic between Trafalgar entrance and Ashbury entrance. It is a privacy issue for both sight and sound. Looks half landscape from their home's view. And then Bellevue entrance. The sidewalk Esplanade here is very curvy. Excuse me, this is the Esplanade line of sight, Bush at Wynwood to Greendale. The sidewalk Esplanade here is very curvy, left to right to left, with shrubs planted too close to the edge of the sidewalk, as well as incorrect shrubs, such as firebush, which grow too quickly between trims, covering across the sidewalk in no time. But even between times, due to the nature of these particular shrubs, the line of sight of approaching pedestrians, bicycles, motor scooters, dog walkers with long retractable leashes is severely impeded. The committee has received complaints on this.
And there are the pictures.
Thank you. Who has control of that? Oh, thanks. Yeah, just want to very slowly just scroll right on down through them.
Is that what you're referring to for turf replacement?
No.
Yes, that'd be turf replacement.
Ashbury Commons?
So this is just an example of some of the long turf
Oh, yeah,
areas that
sure
were
is.
turfed in.
Thank you.
So you can see that Scott DeFilippis had talked to me about that before. That's an area that died out when Mainscape was in charge. And it's basically just weeds. And it's kind of hard to tell in that picture, but in the lower left corner, you can see that's just a clump of a weed. And then there's bare dirt, and then there's another clump of a weed. So it grows at an uneven pace from turf. And so these people, like 5 days from now, are looking at a 2-foot-tall weed, and then a shorter weed, and then bare dirt, and then a taller weed in between mowings. So if you happen to go by right after a mow, it doesn't look so bad when it's just weeds and not turf. But if you're living there looking at that, it's, whoa, where's it going? Holy smokes.
Whoop.
Okay, technical difficulties.
Allison, while you're up there, though, and we're going through this,
Yeah.
it'll be a lot quicker to answer this.
Absolutely.
Moving 21 baby royals, 3 baby canaries, and 3 baby coconut palms, I think that is.
Correct.
Where are they, number one?
Okay, the 3 baby canaries are at the veterans entrance, and they were planted about 12 steps apart instead of like 25 steps apart just inside the gate.
Mhm.
And they need to be spread apart because as they mature, you get that.
Yes.
Okay.
And where are we going to put the ones that we're removing?
So there is plans for different areas that we're gonna like iron out for the final thing. The most important ones that, there's two different, to answer your question, there's 2 or 3 places those could go. And we haven't decided as a committee yet which place to put those. We can do it in that same bed, farther apart, or we can take them on Fairmont, where there's gonna be some gardens along there, or we can, do back more towards Pine Island Gate.
Okay.
But then there's 21 baby royals.
Yes.
We are leaving the taller royals there that Taylor Morrison planted perpendicular to each street
Yes.
exit. Leaving those, they're already above the canopy. The 21 babies are underneath the canopy now. And as you know, when that growth thing get hit, you're done. And they're to that point now. So the oaks and the shadies are rubbing and bumping into them. So they need to go. So there was the bigger Taylor Morrison entrance that didn't get planted. Oh, I'm sorry, that's along
Sandoval
Royalty,
Parkway.
Cape Royals, on that cyclone fence area. Our shady ladies and our oaks are on the other side of the fence,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they're ours. And so these royals are going to hit into that canopy and get ruined. So we do have to move them. But we want to make sure that the Phase 3 people still get their tropical feel. So we're going to clump like 4 or 5 in a bed where it's all open just inside the gate. We're going to use them to cheapen up, so to speak, our main entrance that never got planted from the Coralina at Pine Island Road up. So that's going to, when they're, Ron asked for the entrance figures, this will cheapen up those because we're reusing. So we'll put 5 of them over there. There's some neighborhoods that had
Is there
expressed
irrigation there? Is there
concern.
irrigation there?
No, that's part of it, though. That has to get irrigated, and that's part of the bigger figures for the entrance there for the Taylor Morrison bid that we put in separate, that Taylor Morrison list that we constructed. Back to your thing, Greendale Woodbourne entrance felt kind of like they had been left out of the Royal Palm feel of the neighborhood, and either side of their entrance needs redone bad. So we're going to put 2 or 3 on the inside of that corner, spaced appropriately. We have at least 8 leaning trees, and it's $625 to cut and grind versus up to $2,500 to cut the roots because of their mature age. Take big machinery to lean them in and then stake them and hope that works, and that's a gamble. So if we're going to have all those holes right there, there's places for those to go in there. And one of the landscape architect designers that Florida Evergreen proposed was adding a couple of them up in that front bed where the, at Veterans, where the canary dates died, kind of putting a few right there. So all of a sudden, all 21 are gone. They're used up in those other areas that need it.
In you
And
being
the
as
coconut palms, there's 4. Taylor Morrison planted them right next to the road, and right at the gates. And as you know, they're going to be 65 to 100 foot tall someday, and they're going to be bombs coming down on people's roofs or on bicyclists or pedestrians. The coconuts, I've witnessed them. They get caught in the dualies of the working trucks that come in, and that's a hot mess trying to get those out, et cetera. So those need to be moved. There's a spot on between Kays and Maleta that Taylor Morrison built a berm, never planted it. The homeowners have been complaining for privacy issues. So those 4 are going to go there, which will balance out that lake because there's 4 already on the Esplanade side. So that will complete the look of that lake on the back side on that commons.
perfect. And I know, maybe for the board though, since you and I are on the same page.
Absolutely.
And in the business together, so to speak, can you tell them what's the when we're taking a palm or other plant, what is the transplant life expectancy? What would you give the board on a 60-40, 50-50 on the transplant?
I'm not going to play that Russian roulette game.
In your experience.
I talked to Crawford about that, and they're fairly confident because I had a lot of reservations moving that huge canary date up front, and they felt very confident that if they did the correct procedures. Their comment was, these are all young, let's do it this year, that's our highest success rate. If we put it off a year, it goes down exponentially.
And it does, and I think the board just needs to know that too, that, when you're taking, palms are, as you see it all the time if you're on Pine Island, and you'll see
Right.
palms that are already pulled out of the ground and they're wrapped, as long as they're cared for, but just be aware that it is not 100% transplant rate. The thing, and I knew this was going to be your answer, but I just needed it in my head. The thing that gets me is we're spending $9,000 to move plants that, again, I don't want to beat the dead horse, but we need to talk about the elephant in the room that our subject matter expert had planted a year or two ago. So we spent the money, we planted those, it was the right plant in the wrong place, and now we're having to spend $9,000 to put the right plant in the right place. So, it's just very frustrating that the residents are having to spend, their good money throwing it at a bad idea. And we can go throughout the community, as you know, to see where a lot of bad ideas were done with landscaping, and we're paying double and sometimes triple for. So what do? Do we hope, it's not going to happen, but do we hope that the royal palms grow through the canopy and get to the 60, 80 feet? It rarely will happen.
That's not
'cause
gonna happen
right,
in this
exactly.
case.
So do we allow that investment to die there, or do we spend the money to move something that we already spent to have planned? That's the problem that I have. It's good money after, bad. And it's a shame it came to that, but it's a lot of money to move and time and effort, and it's not 100% guaranteed that every one of those are going to survive, so.
Scott, those were $150 apiece for the baby royals. So that was $3,150 for those. But the other issue is that when Taylor Morrison put all those trees on the outside of the fence between us and the golf course, they were placed too close together. And so we have a problem with that too. So it just all wasn't one person, and I'm not trying to defend one person against another. It was a multiple over many years of different entities putting the wrong plant at the wrong place. They should never have had those shady ladies and oaks that close together along the fence because they're all growing into each other. And the same thing is along Surfside. They grow into each other. So they were way too close to begin with, and that was Bonita Bay. So we've got many entities doing something that should have been spaced farther apart, whether it was the original landscaper, whether it was a city obligation. I don't know, but we can't just lump it all on one individual.
Understood, but again, you need to, because that was a cognizant thing done when somebody who's purportedly an expert, you would have never done that.
I personally get 3 or 4 different professionals involved with all my decisions. I need backup for me, for my own comfort zone.
Correct. So, I mean, we do
So when
need
I
to
say
call a
these-
spade that we're
So
spending
when I'm
more
saying
money
these
because of
royal
somebody's
palms need to
inequities.
be moved, I've asked.
I don't think
the
that's
head
going
of
to solve the
Arborist
problem right
No,
now.
it's
We
not,
just got to
but-
figure out what are we going to do with the situation we got now. You
Can
can't-
we obtain $150 palm trees again? Would that be the
Well,
easier answer? To
Right.
put them in a different place and hope that some of these survive that are already in the ground? Can we obtain more of them at $150
Right.
apiece?
Yeah, and one of those actually was hit by lightning already, and
Yeah.
it's not feeling so good, so he might not make a transplant.
Gotcha,
But
but
that's
the question is,
It's
can we?
one-third
Yeah,
the cost.
it's a lot less by
Right.
purchasing new baby royals and putting them
Right.
along. And that was a total cost of putting them in, getting them, delivering them,
Yep.
putting them in the ground was $150 apiece. Is that an option?
Yeah, and again, that's a great point, because sometimes it is less expensive to do new, but what do you do with the ones that are existing already there? So you let them, I don't know what that answer is. Do you let them succumb to their own, or do you just?
We give them to residents if they are willing to pay to come and move them to their yards.
I don't have the answer to that. I know, that was a great point you brought up, Molly, is we could do new for a third of the cost.
There is a fee for taking those down if you want them down, or if they die from where they're at, there is a fee to remove and haul off.
And that's provided we're going to do every one of these things on this list. I mean, this is well above what any one would expect. So this may or may not be an item that we want to even deal with for
But
this year.
something
These are-
else we have to take into consideration, you know, the budget is not 100% landscape. And we have already increased the landscape budget by 30-some% from 300 to 450,000. So I mean, so we have addressed a landscape deficiency, but then when is enough
Right.
in balancing the budget? So you know, was it nice to do every one of these things? You know, absolutely. But you know, we're tasked with a fiscal responsibility of what the burden that we can bear, and I think that has gonna at some point has to be the paramount decision maker.
Where I plan on addressing that is, I'm gonna roll out as soon as possible a 5-year budget, and every year, starting in 2021,
I mentioned that
we
to
will
you.
be approving the first year's budget of a 5-year budget every year. So every time we approve a budget, we'll see 4 more years in advance, and I think some of these items will be phased in.
And I think though, like, you know, we're talking about turf grass and things like that, and 3-gallon plants and all that is something, like you're saying, is something that we can roll out. But when we're dealing with, even though we're calling them baby royals, there's gonna be a point where those trees are gonna be too big to move. And, you know, you're looking at a 25% success rate in moving them. So the point being is, I think that's the thing that really stood out to me as an investment for the HOA, that you know, we're looking at a potential $12,000 investment, the 9 to move them and the 3 to originally buy them. That's a pretty substantial amount of money. So what do we do with those? Do we leave them be and let them succumb? Or do we, as somebody just mentioned, you know, have a raffle for 21, come and dig?
Allison, what is the removal cost?
It varies.
Like the dead one that's out there.
Yeah, that varies, yeah.
I asked Allison, what is
Would
the
cost to
removal
move.
cost for a tree? There's one that's dead.
There's one company that'll do like a Ganoderma, you know, palm for $350 a tree.
So twice what it costs to put it in.
And that's, yeah.
So,
But I'd hate to see that investment that we've already made go to waste. But again, it does come down to, we know it's, if we can get one for 150, that's 4 feet, 3 foot of wood, 4 foot of wood, whatever it was
Yeah,
originally.
there were 3, I think, yeah.
So can we get it for 150 planted and purchased? I don't know if those days are long gone, or I know I believe it was Danny Yates gave us that. No, it was
No,
not.
it was up across the road from them,
Oh, okay.
from what I understand.
Oh, Palm Source or Palm City. Okay.
Just for the turf up there, if you can kind of see where the red line is, you can see the difference between the green grass that's down by the water is our normal grass, and that looks a little brown right now, that's the Bermuda taking over. It's an invasive. It only continues to grow. That's a huge area there. We have many, you can scroll, areas through town. So there was those bare spots we showed you before, and that's a Bermuda. This is another huge area across from Brightside. That is all invasive right there. There's a little bit of normal grass right up along the bushes and a little bit next to the sidewalk where those words are. The size and scope of it up and down the esplanade right there is pretty big. And that's another bare spot. If we kill the weeds, you get bare dirt, and then the weeds come back because we're not replacing the turf in the past. Here's your baby palm pictures we talked about, the ones on the left. Or with the under shady ladies, and you can see the center growth that comes straight up through the middle is what's so important not to get knocked into. You can see already they're getting knocked about. The one on the right is under an oak tree. This is just me standing taking a line view. You can see how intermingled the branches already are. It's getting to the point of almost no return. It's just a blank sheet. I did a hard page between each one. This is our surf side. This is kind of heartbreaking to see. There's all of that sandy soil. The grass has long died away. Many of the bushes have. And you can see the tire tracks on the sidewalk that our little kids sit on to wait for the bus, and senior citizens as well as children ride their bikes up there. It's exposing our roots of our trees. How much more are we going to let that erode, and what's that going to do to our trees in a wind if they don't have dirt to hang on to? There's another Surfside picture again. You can see the tire tracks on the sidewalk. I suppose a gator or something had driven over it. But that's where our kids sit to wait for the buses and where we ride our bikes going to and from the shops. And again, our roots exposed. It's a pretty steep area. We need to get some turf on that to stop that erosion. In this particular spot,
No.
I talked to several landscapers. I told them I did not want turf right there. It's too steep. We'll do a jasmine. There's a snow jasmine, which is pretty pinks and whites and all. Doesn't matter to many people, I know. But that'll hold that soil in the steepest spots, because I didn't want to take the risk of the riding mowers tipping over on that slope. But for the majority of it would be turf. This is our blind curves that we have between Windwood and Greendale. That I've actually had people emailing and stopping me where they've had so many near accidents and falls. You've got those long leashed dog walking people, and they walk ahead of their owners. You've got people on bikes, the kids on their motorized scooters to and from school, and bicyclists of all ages, all meeting at that intersection. There's 2 of them there. This is the second one coming up. If you scroll back just the littlest bit, so we see the top of that tree by that red arrow, that fire bush is planted right on the sidewalk. It wasn't planted 4 foot back from the sidewalk. There is no way, with the number of times we pay to have that trimmed, so if you come back 6 to 8 weeks later, it actually is all the way across the sidewalk. There's only room for one to walk on there. That blue line shows you the severe curve that it just goes clear left, clear right, clear left, clear right between Windwood and Greendale. That tree is the angle of that red arrow, but nobody can see it in the past with these 8 leaning plus trees because the shrubs hide the trunks. Most people walking by there don't realize that tree is at that angle because the trunk is hidden by our shrubs. But if you crawl back there, you'll see the roots are all up out of the ground and the tree is at that angle of that red arrow, leaning down towards the sidewalk. There's several just past here on that bend that you'll see also doing the same. Okay. We also have a oak tree that now has Ganoderma. It's, I think, closer to Blackburn, and that they're recommending should come down. Over the several months that we've been watching it, the number of conchs is growing in size and number, but look at the hollow part of that log in that dark V. It's actually shedding down material down onto the mushroom conchs. So it's rotting from the inside. And I asked our arborist for Crawford, and he recommended, because it's right next to the sidewalk, that that get cut down and stump ground and removed. So that particular one, if we look to the left, the roots are all up on the left, but not leaning per se, but I clumped it in with that for the group discount with Crawford.
What is the cost of removing that one particular tree?
Do you have that right there, Jerry? They ranged from $6.25 on up to $2,500 for if we cut roots and braced and leaned. Most of the cutting of the trees and the stump grinding came to about $6.25 on average.
So that tree would run about $6.25 to that particular tree.
I'll have to look, but that was my average on all of them on that list.
That tree will be gone before 2020.
I'm sorry?
We'll go ahead and take care of that before 2020.
Okay, so that's not going to be on our list
This is one of
at
our
all.
line items we're asking for now.
Yeah, but we're going to have to go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Especially with the Ganoderma, you have to
Yeah,
get rid
yeah.
of that. You have to.
This is another example of leaning trees. If you go down just a little bit more, you can see the root ball that was hidden by shrubs. So it's actually up out of the ground. So on most of those 8+ trees that we're talking about, if you crawl through the shrubs that you don't normally see from the road or the sidewalk and check out the ones that are leaning, you'll see that it had come up out of the ground some point in the past. and the dirt and everything is higher than the horizon. And again, some of those to cut those stump, because it happened in the past, they have re-rooted somewhat. So they have to go in and cut the roots around the tree as if they were gonna like take it out and sell it. Then they have to use big machinery to come stand it back up, and then some big high-powered stakes. That's $2,500 a tree. They said it's cheaper to cut it out, grind it, and plant a new one in a close proximity place. Some of those are ones that are crowded between, like a shady crowded between two oaks, and we would not replace it there. But somewhere else down the sidewalk,
And I think it's fair to
We
say
can do
that
that.
there are a couple leaning ones that I've seen, and we've talked about this before, that, in my opinion, I think it would be worth the money to save that specimen tree instead of, and others that, you're right, are too crowded or whatever. So I think that's going to kind of be
and we did, in that list of 8, there's some that are only costing $70 because the roots aren't out of the ground so much that we can't just cut off the heavy limbs where it's leaning towards, and hopefully gravity will take it back. One was at 70, one was at 110, because it was small enough that we could cut the root and brace it without the heavy equipment to shove it. So we tried our best to be as conservative as possible. And my conservative, I think, is opposite what financial people say. When I say conservative, this farm girl means I'm trying not to spend your money. So I picked and choose tree by tree with the arborists. How can we do this? If the roots aren't out where we think it might fall in the next wind on the sidewalk, if it wasn't that we needed big equipment to come in to shove it back, then we did it on that $70 to $110.
But I do think, though, don't omit a $2,500 if we know that it's a freestanding, decent specimen tree, because again, if we're culling a tree that's a specimen tree that has a 8 or 10 inch caliber, and we're putting a 2 inch caliber tree in there.
Like our Geiger trees down at Calypso Park that I'm asking for the $500.
And I
Let's
agree
get
with
the
that too.
mahogany
Yeah,
out of
I
it
agree
and
with
the
that.
oaks.
But some
Yeah.
of these are specimens that I think it would be beneficial to spend that $2,500 on.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Here's on that same sidewalk with the line of sight issues between Windwood and Greendale. That blue line is the sidewalk. You see it goes between those, and the trees actually are leaning towards the sidewalk. Doesn't look like it in that picture, but that's what it is. And if you crawl behind the bushes on some of those, the root balls are up. The ones where they're not up, that would be the $70 to $110 fix by just cutting the heaviest limbs. Like in that back rear tree, if that happened to be one of them, we would cut the heavy limbs that are pulling it towards the sidewalk and hope we could stake it back up more economically. This goes to the bright side thing and the oyster plants. When you mentioned the bright side corners, oyster plants are invasive and they take over an area. So in that fixing up of the bright side entrance, you have the issue of the yellow ginger that was planted in amongst the oleander, but you also have where homeowners' oysters have grown in, and when Crawford went in, they actually the oysters had taken out the planted carissa shrubs. So in that cost, we have to do the labor of getting rid of the invasive, as well as replanting some carissa where they'd been killed out. This is more of that bright side corner. There's the ones that had been put in there, and there's still a little bit remaining of the oleander coming up from its roots in amongst that, but that would all be taken out, and the problem is both sides of the entrance then need to be fixed. You can't just fix just one side. They have to, in my opinion, it should be uniform. So if we put stoplight crotons on this right side, then we should take out the oleander on the left side under the shade, because quite frankly, oleander doesn't like to be in the shade, and they don't do well there. That's probably why these got planted to the ginger, because it's a shade plant. But if we take out the oleander on the left, I had the vendor promise me they would reuse that oleander in other areas where it's died out in the community. And that way, even if it only has a 50-50 chance of survival, because it's old oleander, that's still more oleander we don't have to buy. And if they would throw that in their bid, and they did for me, then it's a win-win. This is the Belleville Common Sidewalk. That's their way they get to the clubhouse. And I only have a picture of just the one side, but basically there's 5 plumbago on either side. Normally would just be covered under your plant replacement thing. It's a line item now because of budget. Thank you. Questions, comments?
I just think my comment would have, in working with you before in both of our history in the industry, in my opinion, there are quite a few a la carte items that really need to go into this year's budget. I mean, because it's going to wind up costing us in the long run more than, if we just delay addressing those issues.
Yeah, the things that you see today were my #1 priority. They weren't enhancements. They weren't fixing up anything that a committee would want to change for just aesthetic reasons. These were things basically considered safety, or, like the surf side with the erosion down, or trees that are leaning, if you notice. We're not asking to doll anything up or change tastes because somebody else is coming in with different tastes, different committees. These were things that we felt needed to be addressed by the board. And then in our minds, we have another year after that, after we get these things fixed, to start doing those beautifications.
Are you able to give us some examples? Like, I know we discussed the entrance, that you had some professionals review our entrances and make some comments. Could you just expound on that a bit, what you were told?
Yeah, did you get the email just before the meeting today from
No.
me? Maybe you
Sitting
didn't get a
here, I
chance to
briefly
look
looked at
at it. Yeah, so we did have experts come in and give their opinion because several people had asked of the committee to consider enhancements at all 3 entrances into the community. And so we did reach out to our vendors and ask them to put things together, and they all did. The range came in very wildly one direction and another, depending on what the committee would choose as a look or plants. A plant could cost for a 3-gallon size something, or this big beautiful specimen, 45-gallon odoratisserum, it's huge. So you get things from $15,000 to $75,000 for one area. I mean, it just varies so widely. So like from a financial person, your eyes would just roll back in your head. From this, your black and white brains, versus.
You see Tracy?
The.
Sure. And I guess the point is that these are things that we're not even considering in the current budget because they're more of wants.
Mainly
as
because
opposed to needs.
a lot of the aesthetic things, there wasn't money for right now. And we see so much things like we needed the perimeter done, and that was going to be 30. We need Surfside fixed, that was going to be 50. We need, we need, and 60 for turf. It seemed unreasonable to, when we sat down and whittled for this, I was asked to triage, rate everything 1, 2, or 3 as to what could possibly wait until we could budget for it. So what you see is the very whittled down version of the start, which was anything you see that could be done to our expectations and standards of what we want to come home to, down to what we needed for this meeting for today. And a lot of you have the worksheets that I had worked on originally and are aware of the bigger scope that we were hoping for. But it's impractical, I think, for 2019. But I do have the numbers, and like I said, some of them were 200,000 if we wanted to go just hog crazy and totally redo veterans. One came in at 2.25. And I thought, well, that's pretty
Unreasonable.
I guess
unrealistic.
the main point is those things aren't even being considered at this point.
I would love to. I mean, if you all win the lottery, I've got the
Well,
figures,
for
the numbers, and
purposes
the
of this
drawings
But
from
what
all
I-
the experts.
What I would like to say, though, don't let the line blur between cost and either aesthetics or and aesthetics is the word I'm looking for, because again, as just myself as a board member, you know, I'm gonna say, you know, like I said before, if it's $625 to cut that specimen tree down, or $2,500 to stake it and root prune it, if I look at that and say it's a specimen tree, I don't have a problem spending the $2,500 versus the $625 if we're gonna, you know, have that surviving specimen tree, which we're gonna wait 15 years to get that to be another specimen tree. So I don't have a problem, you know, spending that extra money. I know the cost benefit of that, so don't, you know, don't pigeonhole yourself into, you know, money, money, money. That's definitely a priority, but in the end, is it worth spending the additional money to get a better product? So, you know, consider
Awesome.
that too.
Yep.
In a 16% increase in the HOA budget, you can do everything on this list.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to.
So I think the next step is to decide which one of these, if any, that we want to include in the budget. And then after we've solidified that, then we'll talk about funding.
This first list,
It's already in.
it's already in, so we
correct.
don't even have to look at that.
That's correct.
And I think you said the third list is not as important, which is why it's in third.
Maybe a better way to go about this would be, what percentage of increase are we willing to approve for the community? And then once you have that number, then you can decide what you can afford. Is anyone willing to go more than an 8% increase in an HOA budget for 2020?
My answer to that would be, I'm willing to go more than the 8%, but I would definitely choose my source of funding for that 8, 10, 12%. Whether it's through increase in dues, whether it's for taking out of the bulk telecommunication surplus, which are all options. So
They are.
I don't want to just, you know, say I'm in favor of a percentage without attaching a funding source to that.
Well, I think we have to decide, are we willing to accept the 8% of the items that are in the budget other than these landscape items? As I mentioned, you know, we've already raised the landscape item 150,000 in the 8% that's in the regular budget. Or do you want to cut something out of this budget?
So, just so I'm clear, for instance, the Surfside perimeter, is that included or not included in the 8%?
It is
No, that is not,
included.
that is not. Anything that's down here at the bottom is above and beyond the 8%. You see the 8% is the yellow, anything below that would be in addition to.
And it's a difficult way to go about it either way. Personally, I'd like to see a 0% increase, but part of the analysis is whether we are our own thresholds. Are we willing to allow Surfside to continue to look the way that it does? Are we open to carving that out again from the landscaping budget?
Well, just to talk, I'd be willing to have a 9.1% increase to include some of the items in the à la carte in our budget.
How did you come to?
9.1. I added the annual plant replacement item for 18,000 because that's an annual thing, not a once a quarter, not a once every 3 years or 5 years. I added the $29,000 annual tree trimming because that's an annual thing. I added the $1,700 Calypso Park line of sight because that's a safety issue. I added the $1,700 Esplanade line of sight because that's a safety issue. And I added $24,000 for a contingency to give us a little more fund balance at year end. So those items total $74,400. And if we add that to the budget, it would cause our increase to raise from 8% to 9.1%.
I think 8% is a stretch myself.
I do too. I think it's going to be hard to get there.
Well, let me just throw mine out, and you guys could talk about it. And this is where I'm going to vote. I could tell you right now. Through our telecommunications surplus fund, that savings is residents' money. Period. End of story. It was money that was not given back to them. It was voted to sequester that in the lockbox and all those other things. But at the end of the day, that is still the residents' money. If we look at the 8% increase, that's an increase of $187.88 yearly to a resident in increased assessments. So if you take that $187.88 and subtract it to what they are already currently putting into the telecommunications surplus fund per door is $463.16. So if you have zero increase to the residents and use it straight from the telecommunications surplus fund, you will then be putting only $275.28 per door into the telecommunications surplus fund. That takes you from a current funding level of $660,000 and change down to $392,000 and change, with no increase to the homeowner. And that again is because that is their money, and you know, we've done it for numerous projects because we don't have any operating capital. Everything comes out of the telecommunications surplus fund. So in my mind's eye, that is still their money, and why we wouldn't take that out of the telecommunications surplus fund.
Don't you
agree.
think that'll impact the expansion?
Eliminate it.
So, but if we're going to go there, a letter was sent out to all the residents that will have $5 million in the telecommunications surplus fund, that we are in great financial shape, but none of this was ever taken into consideration with that propaganda letter that was sent out. The sunshade wasn't taken into consideration. The expanded parking lot wasn't taken into consideration. So that was a fallacy. The residents were sold a bill of goods. So now we still have their money, so why would we say to the residents, we're not going to give you back your money that you're already contributing to it, and encumber them with a increase in their dues?
I would like to add to that too, because a lot of residents have this misconception that we have this enormous amount of cash. And a lot of them refer back to this February 11th letter that says we are going to have a clubhouse, a storm damage fund of $600,000, aerated lakes, zero borrowing, zero special assessments, and zero increase in base assessments. In addition, we will have a fully paid clubhouse with approximately triple its current size, and an additional $4.49 million that will be paid into the savings by 2026. So based upon this, residents naturally think we have all this money. And this email was sent out to every resident. Then it was taped onto people's mailboxes during campaign times. So we come in and they think we have all this money to spend. And I really want to hear from the board whether they feel this letter is accurate or not, because I don't feel it is.
The letter was actually also handed out at board meetings.
I just think we need to be straight with our residents and what they can expect.
Well, the way you talked about it, we were going to talk about the budget expenditures, and then we were going to talk about funding, but we bled over into that. That's all. So that's why my 9.1 was going to be based on, it was going to come from telecommunications, not from increased assessments.
I can see a combination. I mean, assessments have not been, I understand, I only lived here a couple years, but assessments have not increased.
That's correct.
So consequently, I can see an increase, not an exorbitant increase, but I can see that it would be palatable and not touch that telecommunications fund except minimally, because I think people do want to have the expansion. And the longer you put it off, the more expensive it's going to be.
Well, are you saying the minimally 50-50 of whatever the increase is, or? Wait,
Or
what's your definition of
something,
minimally?
something along those lines?
Okay.
Well, according to the letter, as of February 1st, we had accumulated 1.85 million in the CenturyLink savings account for the expansion. Again, I just think, and it also says no increase in base assessments. I mean, this letter it was not that long ago it was sent out. So what has changed here?
Well, if you run the numbers, we approved $1.9 million for a clubhouse expansion. We've already spent $160,000 for soft costs. We're planning on spending $65,000.
I thought 125.
Soft costs in Jerry's numbers, 160.
No, that would be if you, going forward
Continue,
to
okay.
ready to put the shovel in the ground.
Okay, and then the parking lot is 65 that we're talking about at tennis. So that leaves $1.675 million for construction.
The soft costs were not included in what was approved, the 1.9.
I thought they were.
No, they weren't.
That's-
Yeah, I have a transcript of the video, which I could
Okay.
share with
Well,
you.
let me get through this and we can talk about
But
that.
other than that, I think you,
The fund balance at 8/31 was 1,961,000. The collections between 9/1 and 12/31 this year will be 221,000, which will give us $2,182,000. The non-clubhouse expenditures that we've approved for aeration and other things are 300,000. You subtract that out, pulls us down to 1,876,000 in the fund. That shows we've got $201,000 more in the fund than what we need, what we approved for clubhouse expansion. If the 160 wasn't in there and the whole board agrees to that, then we're still $40,000 over. And I think we should stop collecting money for the clubhouse expansion because we are overfunded at 12/31/19.
Because even with shovel in the ground,
I
it
don't
would be
see that you
another.
got that. I don't think you got
Well,
that.
if-
I don't think
another
you
year.
had that much money in that fund.
We had, yeah, we do.
No,
And
we don't.
that's per Jerry's numbers.
No, we don't. When we finish paying off all these projects that we've started and we do the parking, I think that it would be, in order to reach the number that you would need, it would be somewhere in 2021.
I don't think so because I'm looking at Jerry's Internet Bulk Telecommunications Fund notes that he sent out to us.
They're on everybody's tab, both telecommunications tab, in the budget I sent you.
So if you look at that, that's where my numbers are coming from.
So July 31, we had 1.9 million, and then we're adding 55,481.92 at the end of August. So that should have had our balance at 1.961. And then 371,498 are the expenses other than the clubhouse.
I think the August fund balance is 1.8. I think that the items that we're going to accumulate from September, October, November, December, 221. The value of the fund at the end of December would be 2,084,000. Outstanding projects that still need to be paid would be 251. The parking lot project is 100,000. So the balance, if paying fully committed to all committed projects, would be 1.7. And
So
then if
even
the-
at that number, we'll say we're 200,000 short.
Well, then you have soft costs in addition to the building costs of the 1.9 million.
Well, if the soft costs were not included in the telecommunications funds, they should be in operating funds, and that should be in the budget.
No, they were not included in the
Well,
amount
were
from
they-
taking from
Were
the
they magic money was just going to come from somewhere?
No, it was going to come from the telecommunications, but it wasn't in the cost that you approved when you approved a $1.9 million fund.
So we have to assume that somebody says when we're going to build a building for 1.9 million, you're going to go in there and you're not going to sit on a chair, you're not going to have to pay engineering fees, you're not going to have to pay that.
Now, all those things were, you need to, well, I'll send you a transcript, which I've sent a couple of folks. I got, Denise gave me the transcript. I then cleaned up and there were questions, there were not about 14 or 15 questions that were answered. I will send you a copy of that. Read it and then go look at the video. And It'll tell you that the building was 1.9, soft costs weren't included, 100,000 was included in the furnishings, and all that money was coming out of the telecommunications. So whether we all realized the actual cost of it was not 1.9, but it was 1.9 plus all this other sundry things.
And do we know what those additional ones may come out to? I know we can't put a.
Well, I figured another 500,000. So 1.9 would be about 2.5.
2.5.
And I'm not trying to say that that's what
No,
we're
but
going
we're
to do.
just-
But
no
so in order to come up with 2.5, I figure if we didn't take anything out of the telecommunications, it would take 14 months before, or March of 2010, of 2000, no, I'm sorry, March of 2021. And if we took at least 4% of this money, of this 8% increase out of the telecommunications, which I think, we definitely must do. I don't think it should be an HOA fee increase totally. It would be until mid-May of 2021 that you would have the 2.5 level that would pay the soft costs, the furnishings and so forth and so on.
Irrigation.
And so forth. So that's how I had analyzed what was in that information.
So, and those are great numbers. So we're saying 14 months.
Right.
So even if we were, and I hate to use his terminology, but shovel ready, even if we were shovel ready for the project, it wouldn't be 14 months till we're,
You couldn't be shovel. You could start the start the project because it's paid for it in increments, and as
Right.
long as it's not done before May of 2021,
Well, that's my
you'll
point,
have
'cause
the money
we're gonna
to
be
pay
doing-
for it.
Right,
And we
exactly.
take no more money out of the
Out of it.
telecommunications fund.
Correct.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, as far as projects are concerned, I think, one of the things that a lot of residents said along, we've got a lot of other things we need to take care of first, and some of these projects that we have put in here that we're committing ourselves to were some of those. I think, we have now stumbled on landscape as an unfunded thing, which is where our dilemma is right now as to what we need to do with that. And I acknowledge, it's certainly an issue, and we've got to come up with a conclusion to it.
So you're saying if we have an 8% increase and we take 4% of it out of the telecommunication fund contributions, that 4% would remain out of it forever, and your $2.5 million in March of 2021 is accomplished without the contribution of that 4%.
Yes.
In perpetuity,
That-
because
in-
it's not
in-
going to go, the budget's not going to go down next year, so we're going to have the same money next year.
Exactly. You would be directing 134,000 to operations in 2020 if
Permanently.
you took 4% out of the contribution to the telecommunications
And we
fund.
quit calling it a contribution to that, we just say that is now operational assessment.
Right. So I said that about the Envira. I said, it's not a contribution, it's now operations. Don't say it goes to the fund. It's
It
now
confuses the
committed
fact.
to the operations.
That's right, it's operating.
And this would be committed to operations because it's not going to be put in there and taken back out. It's operations. But what our dilemma is, 8% balances the budget. It's not talking about these other issues that we've got down here at the bottom.
Excuse me, everyone, and I say this loud enough to be heard. My husband has pneumonia. He has to have an echocardiogram done because I think he has congestive heart failure.
That's a higher
Fort
priority.
Myers
Go.
At 12 o'clock, and I have to go.
That's more important.
I will say this. I am in favor of doing a 4% out of telecommunications and a 4% increase in monetary contribution in raising the dues. I will try to listen to the rest of this on the phone. Whose number should I call? Don, do you have your phone with you?
Yeah.
I will call you once I get in the car so that I can continue this with you, but his health has to come first.
So in essence, what you're saying is a 4%, whatever that number is, 4% reduction in contributions to the telecommunications fund from the current assessments.
Correct.
Yes.
And a 4% increase in the current assessments.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be, I have that here too. If we did that,
It's half of 187.88.
yeah, it's, if you increase that 4%, it would be $23.48 a quarter. $7.83
Yeah.
a month.
The total increase, the
Yeah.
8% is
It's six,
46.97.
it would go from 587 to 610.56.
And that's us saying we're not going to do any of these à la carte items, is that?
Well, and then we've got to make a decision of what you're going to do about these.
Well, I think a
À la
big thing
carte
too
items.
is, as we're discussing this as the board, it's also, as we all know, it's gonna go before the residents too. And they're probably gonna really give us an idea of where they wanna go.
As soon as they listen to this
Well, they're gonna
video
be-
this
yeah,
morning.
I'm curious to see the feedback too, and I hate to say this, but, it might change the dynamics of what we're doing in this community. They might say, I want it all to go to landscaping and the heck with the building, or I don't care about landscaping, build the building. So they're gonna tell us.
That's true.
That, like they do at city council meetings, you're gonna get everybody parading up there and give them their opinion.
But the difference, and I really understand citizen input, because it does have a tendency to control the vote.
Turn your mic on.
Oh, sorry. But as I often say to my fellow council members, there's maybe 150 or 200 people that come up here and they want this, but we represent 185,000 people. So how can you listen to just this small segment?
Agreed.
I think with our community, though, we have a better response percentage-wise. I think there will be people attending that speak out, but I think we also have to be careful for those that don't attend.
Absolutely. It is, again, and I always, sitting on council before too, it's always the greater good. You have to look at the greater good. In the end, that's what we're voting on.
And you would be surprised at the number of people that believe just because you live in a district that you have to go along with whatever they want because you're their representative. And my response always is, yes, I have to live in the district, but I'm elected citywide. And I think that's important to just always keep in mind.
Bill, I think there's one more number that we need to have on the table. What is the increase that would be required to do this entire à la carte list that's here below us?
The entire à la carte list,
What percentage
Equals-
increase does that represent?
$208,000. So
Yeah.
that's out of a $4 million if you don't include the phase 3 landscaping.
Okay, so
it's a 5%.
5%.
So another additional 5%. So to do
Absolutely.
that whole list plus our
13%.
8% would be 13.
13%.
I
Yeah,
just,
that's-
it's a number, I'm not
I've got it
advocating
14.
that.
No,
It's a
we-
number I
we-
think you need to know.
We got it 14%, 14.2%.
And even if you split, let's say you split that, 7 and 7.
So really, to do all of these, we would have to almost double the 8% increase, round
Yeah, you're
figures.
at 7 versus 8.
Well, yeah,
Yep,
so-
yep.
Mhm.
90-some% increase in.
So, that's what you're talking about to make that a reality.
Well, and Jerry said, the whole à la carte list, a lot of it can be phased in over 3 or 4 in his 5-year thing.
Well, that's
But-
why, I mentioned to
but-
Jerry that, we need a 5-year plan.
But when you
For-
look at
for
what
everything.
his à la cartes, the first one says annual plant replacement. So that's not, to be a 5-year plant replacement, it'd be 5 times that amount, right? Because you're talking about that should be added every year.
Every year.
And the annual tree trimming, that's not for 5 years. For 5 years, it'd be 150,000, not 29,000.
Well,
So-
we whittled that to 130 to how much it would be per year to
I
add
need
it to the 15.
29,000 more.
Yeah.
So
It's a
that's
total of 44,000 a year is what we need.
where I was coming with the 9%. I was putting those 2 items in this year's budget because that was an annual number.
Which
And then the
isn't
line of
true,
sight
right.
things and the contingency. I think we need a contingency to build our fund balance. I think it's inappropriate of us not to make only a break-even budget and not be trying to build our fund balance for emergency funds.
Agreed.
It's, you know, he said we need $1 million. I'm only saying we had 24,000 this year.
And I agree with what you're saying, but I also say that had some of this been done last year and the
Absolutely.
year
Of course,
before,
absolutely.
we would
We
be
have
in
to
a
catch
much
up.
better
Mhm.
financial position, and then I would lean more toward the contingency, which, as I said, the city, you know, sometimes it looks at being 3 months reserves, but it never stays there. It always drops back. Not below 2 months, but it does drop way back.
So if we're talking about an 8% increase this year, and then we've got the landscape budget under control at that amount, we're talking 2021. Okay, we're sitting in here, this is the 2021 budget discussion today.
But I
What-
don't
what
think
would-
we've
what
got
would-
the
what would we-
landscaping under control, because these two things are annuals, so they should have been in there. So
Okay,
we're
So
still.
what kind of percentage would we be telling our fellow residents we would be talking about in 2021 if they swallowed some kind of humongous increase in 2020?
Well, the big thing here too is nothing's been factored into the carrying cost of the new proposed building. You know, funding reserves, doing all those sort of things. So that's going to be something that's going to have to be increased at what cost? Since we live paycheck to paycheck here, we're going to have to come up with carrying costs for the new building, which isn't even considered. So that's plays into the picture in 2021 or whenever the building's built.
That's
So-
why I'm projecting forward. What are we talking about here?
So the question begs to, and I'll ask the question, is the building the right thing to do? Because we have all of this other stuff that needs to get done and carrying costs for a building that hasn't been projected or budgeted for. Are the people amenable to another increase in 2021 because we haven't budgeted for a new building and all the carrying costs and reserves and everything there? So what did the residents want? Do they want all the landscape taken care of or a new building, or do they want half the landscape done? Because somebody's going to complain when we don't do the project for landscaping that's close to their house, but we build a new building. So, you know, that's a caveat there. What do the residents really want? Would they rather see the money spent towards redoing all the landscaping or building a new building and having an increase in
Landscape is
2021?
something you can spend money on for.
And that's why they voted you guys in, to make that decision.
Yeah.
And I say, let's phase in some of this over the next several years and have the club expansion, because personally, when I look at other communities and clubhouses, this one does suffer by comparison.
And I don't doubt that, but even if we phase in the other items, there's no money in the operating budget for it. We only
Oh.
get that out of, either we get it out of the mason jars in the backyard, or we get it out of the telecommunications surplus fund. And that's our only source of income, or we raise monthly dues, quarterly dues.
Quarterly dues, but the telecommunications fund, after the building is expanded, after it is taken out, there won't be any more large expenditures out of the telecommunications fund, so it can go to operations.
And I'm not disagreeing with that, but my point before I was a board member to the existing board and president was, in 2026, it goes away.
It's true,
So
but there'll be another.
I guarantee in
Maybe.
2026, there won't be anything as cable or anything like that. We'll be live streaming and we won't be
Could
doing
be.
it. So again, are we being that short-sighted that we're going to say, you know what, we're good to 2026, and then when that funding goes away, we're gone.
Well-
The residents are left holding the bag.
To your point about phasing it in, I was only talking about including 74,000 of the 208,000.
It's
So
true.
I was phasing.
Yes, you were. I know.
Okay.
And I particularly paid attention to the part that where you said was an annual.
Yeah, no, very good comments, and the reasoning I thought is sound as well.
Well, that's why there's 7 of us to vote on it, not 1 to make the decision.
Right.
But Don just better vote right.
And another thought I had is maybe 3 months in, we have a budget adjustment, or 4 months or something, where we see that we're not spending as much as we thought we were going to spend. And
Can-
maybe something from this list
Might be put in.
can
we
be
do that,
added
Jerry?
in.
Yeah, we can do that. It's not changing the budget, but we can reallocate that money. That's
Sure. And the city does that, they reallocate. That's why I say that the 3 months always starts out, but it never ends up.
So are we willing to say we're not going to do the perimeter next year? I mean, that's what it comes down to.
I don't understand that.
Are we not willing, it's part of the à la carte. For instance, you have $47,000
Oh,
for.
Surfside perimeter, okay.
You're talking about Surfside?
Have we even included the veterans perimeter, or has that
Yes,
even been a
that's in the
discussion?
$30,000 that they're giving us.
Okay, good.
It's not predicated on doing Surfside.
No,
Okay.
at all.
I just, the materials that I just gave to Tracy, that I brought in, that were all of the rest of the development orders, there's a cover sheet. And it did talk about the fact that the city has a responsibility for the area up, what's the word I'm looking for?
Right away.
The right-of-way. They have the responsibility for the right-of-way. I was going to go back and ask, since Surfside perimeter is part of the right-of-way, would the city consider covering it? Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure,
That'd
absolutely.
be
Yeah.
huge if you could get that.
I don't know what, I
See,
don't know what the
right-of-way probably
answer.
goes on both sides of the fence, even.
Yes, it does, because I think the right-of-way on residential homes is 25 feet, but I don't know what the rest of it is.
And it goes from the center of the road
Yes.
to a certain number of feet off to the edge.
Do you think we would have an answer prior to a vote? That would be really helpful.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will, I don't count on it because of the fact that there's a lot of discussion about how much money do we spend on medians, because that's a big issue with a lot of, particularly Southwest. North of Pine Island Road, we don't worry about because of the utility expansion, it's all gonna be torn up anyway. And the roads and the medians will all be done then. But there are a lot of people that want the medians taken care of. And so there's 300,000 put in for new medians and then another 400,000 just to maintain. But I'm going to see what happens when I ask that question, because I just read it on what, I didn't know it before, or I didn't realize it. I guess I knew it, but it didn't sink in until I just read it on the cover sheet that I just gave to
So
Jerry.
is that the city's policy to maintain right-of-ways? Because I know in residential, if you have a right-of-way on your property, the city doesn't maintain that.
It doesn't maintain, however, if the property owner puts something there and then the city has to come in,
Right.
it's up to the resident to correct it, I think. Although the city may, I know the city's going to do, because they're taking some right-of-way again, away from residents, they're going to give additional concrete parking on each property if the property owner wants it.
So they're going to take care of their right-of-way at the Pine Island, which again, no, I'm just questioning this because I want to make sure that that stays that way, because in real estate residential, they don't maintain the right-of-way, but the resident can erect a shed or a fence in the
Yeah.
right-of-way, but if something comes through with the
Right.
city, they have to remove it.
Right.
So that's is it a special deal for Sandoval? Will they take that away? Will that be another thing that we have to maintain and budget for, or?
I'm just going to ask them if they'll provide the shrubs, if there's any thought to that.
Okay.
And why not find out the answer?
All they can do is say no.
That's right.
It's no before you ask, and it could be still no, or it could be yes.
Yep. Get 100% of what you don't ask for.
I'm also wondering about that circle at Trafalgar. You know, the circle has dead plants in it. that ours, or is that
That's the
cities?
city.
It's not
I thought it was the cities.
I think the point we need to get to is whether we're going to touch these à la carte items or not. And then I think that will
Perhaps.
help us move forward into deciding then which ones, because if I'm understanding it right, you're saying, Ron, Don, that if we do touch those à la carte items, you believe that the clubhouse would be off the table?
I think you can't expand how long it takes to accumulate what you need much further than mid-2021, or it's not.
I think
can't
that's
do it.
where we need to decide then, and then if it is we're gonna do the à la cartes, then it's a pretty easy decision from that point forward, because we've got plenty of money if the clubhouse is off the table.
I think there's a point in time where, and I'm going to say this with my real estate license on the line, there's a point in time where the aesthetics of the community are going to provide you more of a return on your investment with your home purchase than an expansion of a clubhouse will. Because if you let Surfside go down to a point where the roots are sticking up, trees are starting to lean, and that's going to be a focal point of a main entrance, like Ron alluded to, sprucing up our main entrances. Those are the things, the visual impacts that have more of an impact, if you will, when people are first coming through the gates, whether it's for an open house or whatever. And if they see a clubhouse in the condition that this one is in, you know, I think that's secondary to the visual impact and the other reasons that so many people call Sandoval home or want to. So I think, and it's a tough decision for me for the $200 and some thousand to add to the budget, but I think those are ones that are going to have a direct impact on property values if we let them go any further than they do. Just like, you know, the perimeter stone fencing along, you know, the wall there, we can't let that go any further because of numerous reasons, and we can't let the landscaping go because that's a direct influence on our property value.
Well, I think that, you know, you have to take another opinion just because it needs to be vocalized. You know, I know your passion is landscaping, and I think things, I just account anything that is on this list as unneeded. I think they're all needed, but I think you have to, when you do these budgets and things, you have to come to a balance. And I think that, you know, we have two things that I think there's a contingency of folks that really see that there's a necessity in another area. I say we can't have a meeting without scrambling around or canceling in order to have a meeting with coming up on the 17th of September. We had to ask a group that meets here if they would be willing to you know, not meet that one day so that we could have it. I mean, this is a small little place. You don't realize that. I had my son and a friend of his, and I was showing them around the community, and we came to the clubhouse, and honestly, I was shocked when I looked at it from a show point of how pathetic this is compared to what you see somewhere else, and how inadequate it is, and somewhat antiquated, and this is not just you know, I don't know that we needed the clubhouse that we saw on the plans. I think that's proven to be maybe a little more than you know, that we could afford. But I think that, you know, you have to work towards some kind of an expansion for our community, some kind of expansion, and I think that that's got to be factored in. And I don't think that that you can kill the passion of that, you know, for landscaping totally. I mean, we're going to have a budget here that's, you know, it's landscaping and everything. And as I say, and I'm not against the landscape things, but I just don't think that it can be our whole budget.
I didn't say, yeah, don't include the whole à la carte, but there
No,
are
I
things
mean,
on there that's...
we've increased the landscaping in this budget $150,000
That's
already.
huge.
That's huge.
And you have to add, when you talk about landscaping, You have to add the $970,000 contract for the residential landscape.
Exactly,
It's a
exactly. So
pass-through,
our
but that's-
landscape
that's
bucket
the-
is not 450,
that's the
it's
magnitude.
450 plus the nine.
It's a million,
Well,
a
It's
million and a
million
half.
five.
It's always been almost a quarter or a third of our total budget since day one, except when we started cutting back. You know, that's probably the lion's share of most communities, though. Landscaping is probably
The number one.
the number one line item.
And this was never presented as a choice between maintaining your community and getting a clubhouse expansion. It was never sold that way. It was sold that we
We
have
could
an
do it all.
enormous amount of money. You're
right.
getting a free clubhouse, everything is beautiful, we have
There's
buckets of
there's
money.
never an unlimited supply,
So
you know.
then the question begs to answer, if the people were sold a bill of goods and voted on a bill of goods, why shouldn't they have the opportunity to make that decision again? Knowing the facts as they're presented with our finance committee and the general manager.
Well, I don't think that that is even required, because I think there's a way to do it, both things. If you commit yourself to wanting to do both things, I think they can both be done.
Well, where do we go from here?
I need guidance on what type of budget to produce for the vote. Where do you fall, Ron?
You know, I definitely struggle with this a bit because I definitely see the benefits of the expansion. I personally think that a clubhouse expansion would help this community. The part I struggle with a bit was we were never told that we are taking things out of the landscaping budget previously that we will have to fix now. So a lot of this increase in landscaping isn't raising aesthetics, it's now addressing areas that were neglected. And I think that's, that needs to be conveyed. In terms of what percentages we allocate between CenturyLink and increasing assessments, that's a very, very difficult question. And I don't know if I'm prepared right now to give an answer yet. But I think that's one of the reasons we have a workshop, to hear each other, listen to some residents. It's always helpful to get out in the community and look at these things and determine their impact on residents. And I'm speaking specifically to the a la carte portions. So I wish I could give a more decisive, clear answer at this point, but I'm just not there yet.
Al?
I think I'd be in favor of the 4 and 4, maybe even 5 and 5. You know, that would cover bills 9.1, whatever. Give us maybe a little bit more for the a la cartes. I definitely think an expanded clubhouse is a lot more important than getting rid of a little bit of sand on, and I'm minimizing this, but a little bit of sand on the sidewalk. It's been there for a long time. I've ridden on that sidewalk since I've moved here. It's not attractive, but this clubhouse is definitely not attractive. I guess that's where I stand. I think previous boards have made a big mistake in not raising the assessments. You know, in previous, I think it needs to be done annually in a small amount, you know, not take a big bite out of you, but I think it needs to be done annually. And I think, you know, we should start that now. You know, a certain cost of living increase every year, because we know for sure that landscaping, they're not going to come back to us next year and say, oh, we're going to lower our prices. That's not going to happen. You know, irrigation's not going to go down. Nothing's going to go down. So we do need to keep up with the Joneses. We have to pay for what we want. And so that's where I stand. You know, either the 8% or 10%, and split it between the two methods of doing it.
We've got another meeting. I anticipated there may be some issues, and I think we've got another availability to meet on Thursday. I think that's at 2 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken.
I can't do it.
Well, I think not everybody can,
I
but
can do it in the morning, but I can't do it in the afternoon.
we're just gonna have to make some room somewhere. to meet, but I think we probably need to meet Thursday or Friday. Does everybody agree with that?
No, I won't be here Friday either.
Yeah,
I'm good Thursday and Friday until
What do you get?
or 5.
4 o'clock? Oh, yeah, that's right. Thursday at 4. was
Yeah,
the-
4 o'clock
Yeah.
I can't do.
So
I can
no,
do
no,
it
and
earlier in
I
the
can
day.
do Thursday at 4.
I'm gone till Monday.
Maybe we meet, is everybody available Monday?
Monday, the
Well-
16th?
No, I won't be back Monday either.
Part of that problem is you said you were gonna email the budget proposal to the finance committee this Friday.
Yeah.
So that's
Well-
why we wanted to meet before Friday to get
You
this
have
hammered
phone-
out,
you
to
have
send
phone
it to the finance
availability?
committee.
I'll be working.
You're working?
Bill, just for, tell me what you were putting from the à la carte back in there again, just so I make sure I have
They
everything.
left out the two big ones.
The
and,
annual and the annual.
The annual plant replacement of 18,000,
Right?
the annual tree trimming of 29,000, 1,700 for Calypso Park line of sight, 1,700 for Esplanade line of sight, and I had 24,000 for contingency.
Right, I got that.
I have a suggestion. Why don't you give this budget, this information to the finance committee? Get another group of people to give you some information. I mean, if we meet here in 2 more days, what's going to change?
Yeah, what's
Well,
gonna
you have
change?
the
And what-
opportunity to
and
talk to
we know
people
right
is what I
now.
was hoping.
I mean, I don't see, other than coming back in here and staring at each other again,
I thought
saying
the
what we-
opportunity to talk to some homeowners might be good.
Well,
But we need to check the math too, because I show, in your spreadsheet, you've got 2019, 3.3 million, 2020, 3.6 million, a 1.08 increase. I did my math to say 3.3 million for 19, 3.6 million for 20. That's no a la cartes in there. And my math was 1 minus the 3.3 divided by the 3.6, and I came up with 7.41% increase.
We can check the math, but I mean,
so-
it's the
but it's-
calculations.
So I think it's a little less than 8%, what we got right now.
well,
So-
these are the,
so maybe we can slip-
this is
slip some
where
of this
we
in.
need the numbers people to,
But I agree with Al. I think I would be tickled to death with 5 and 5. I can live with 4 and 4.
I
I'd
o-
rather have 10
I only,
and
pref-
0, but
I only prefer the 4 and 4 because of the fact that cost of living is 3%, 3.1 to be exact. And I'm just not sure how it will be perceived because of the letter that went out in February. No increases.
No, 0 flooring, 0 special assessments, 0 increase in base assessment.
and it wound up. Bottom line, your association is in sound financial condition.
And that's knowing we had basically 2 weeks worth of operating backup cash. When our auditor recommended 3 to 6 months, that's 1.2 million. At 3, 2.4 or 2.2 about there if we went to the high end. That, again, conveying this information is important so people don't assume we're sitting on this pile of cash and just not wanting to do the clubhouse expansion, because that's certainly not the case.
I think that, I agree with that, Ron, and I think that the fact that we are, it is what it is, and how we got here, and what has been said in the past, at this point, I think there's, whatever's on paper, we've got to deal with what the facts are, and we're sitting here, and we've got this pile of money, we've got the telecommunications, we've got a budget that we've got to get approved, and how are we going to juggle what we've got right here to accomplish what we need to accomplish?
And I have to say, I certainly appreciate that about this current board.
Yeah.
Straightforward, we deal with what we're dealing with.
Right.
Well, there was never a discussion like this in the history of Sandoval.
No.
This is the first time. When the board comes to the table to vote on the budget and they're told they're increasing the capital contribution by 25%, and that's the first they've heard about it, that's wrong. We're trying to be transparent. And we're streaming it so the whole community hears what we're saying.
And looking at it, that's the one portion of our finances that has exceeded expectation in 2019.
One thing I'd just like to say, though, for everybody who may be listening online that's streaming or tune in afterwards, I saw a lot of comments out there on, Facebook pages and everything that we were trying to hide something or not being transparent. And just for everybody out there, anybody who's been involved in either politics or boards or outside Sandoval like I have, and I know Marilyn has, and everybody probably in here who sat on, but this is a workshop session for the board. So we could have information to go out to you and provide you with all the information you need to know what's going on in your community, which, like Ron said, has never happened before. So this is step one in the process, so we can glean all of that information and make better decisions. It has nothing to do about not being transparent. We've been here for 4 hours. I have a job to go to, as many people do. But rest assured, when we finally say this is what we believe is going to be the best, you will have the opportunity to have your input and let us know where you want or where we might have erred in our decision. So please, coming from me, this isn't trying to hide anything or any covert thing to keep the residents out. I think this board has been very transparent, and I'm going to stand on that as my final comment.
Thank you.
Till my term is up.
I do think it's nice that we all have different opinions.
Yeah.
And we have time to think about it and come back together.
We talk about it together. We didn't.
Yes.
Nobody sprung anything on anybody else.
No.
When can the Finance Committee commit to giving back feedback? Because it's sooner rather than later is what we're going to need, obviously.
The Finance Committee meets
15 minutes after they
Thursday the 19th.
smack the gavel.
So, yeah, that's, other than,
The Finance Committee meets the 19th, so if you mail it to them on the 13th, they've got 4 or 5 days to look at it before we meet. The one thing we really have to do on the agenda is the credit card audit report. So we need to get that out of the way, and then the rest of the meeting can be just to the budget. So I would think at the end of that meeting, we'd have a report ready to come, or points ready to come to the board. That's the purpose of that meeting.
Okay. And in the interim, if you talk to homeowners, I think the 2 things we're looking for is what's the comfort level what's the threshold for an increase, considering all of the landscaping issues that we have, and if it comes down to it, what do you prefer? All these landscape items or a clubhouse? Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but I think that's what we need to kind of have a feel for before we go into this next meeting.
And I think the thing, like the president said too, is he went over the things that are in the pipeline, the to-do list too. And this is assuming that our to-do list is gone. We don't have anything moving forward that also creeps up. That's going to be we want this, we want that, another 100,000 here, another whatever here. So
I see that as off the table.
yeah, well, it has to, yeah.
Period.
It is what it is right now.
What if all the gates just fall over? We've got to fix them, though.
Right, exactly.
But
Well, that'd be a reserve, though, wouldn't
at
it?
some point, we need to create a capital budget and also identify a funding source for the capital budget.
Absolutely.
And we've never had that. And typically in the development period, you don't need it, so it's about, we need to start looking at that.
And we know what the funding source is,
I mean,
the residents.
The one thing that we've never had here in Sandoval isn't a special assessment for anything. I mean, when I was doing evaluations of property management companies, one of them had to have their pool repaired, and they had had a special assessment to do that. We did ours. We had the reserve money. The reserve for us, you don't want to be careful how you say that, so far, is working.
And that's one thing, again, and I'm just going to go back to my other hat as a realtor, and I tell people this when they're looking to buy in Sandoval. Sandoval is the exception out there when it comes to gated communities or whatever, where reserves are funded as well as we are, because most communities out there, like you said, anytime they want, I have property in Porta Vista, we needed a new roof. $4,500 are just paid for every residence. They wanted to put a fence around it. Everything that they do is a special assessment because they live paycheck to paycheck and the reserves are so underfunded. And that is definitely a way of getting your community, people not to buy in, because you got to put 25% down and 30% down, all this. And that's where we are positioned, I think, very well with our reserves and now I think our finances also. It's just a matter of defining a funding source as we go into.
I was also mentioning to Maryland that many of the communities have CCDs.
Exactly.
And the roads. Sandoval owns the roads, so you do not have an HOA fee, and then you have a $2,000 or $3,000 charge on your tax bill.
In perpetuity.
Paying for the bond that put your roads
Roads
in.
and sewers,
So
yeah.
we don't have that, so even if our HOA fees creep up a little bit, and then, you know, we don't have a CCD you're paying in addition
Yep.
to it.
Exactly.
One thing we haven't talked about, well, Jerry talked about it, we're talking about an 8% increase or whatever it is. The people who have landscaping are gonna have a larger increase because their landscaping is increasing. So it's gonna be whatever we talk about here. If we agree 4 and 4 and we say 4, well, those people are gonna have a 8 or 9% increase because they've got 2 increases coming at them.
With the irrigation and the landscape.
And, yeah, the landscape contract itself,
Right.
plus the irrigation and the plant replacements. That's,
Well, then I think maybe it would be good if we schedule the next workshop after the Finance Committee report.
Is that in the form of a motion?
okay, well, then that's.
So when is that? Let's
we-
try to
the-
firm that
The
up.
finance committee meets on the 19th. The board meets on the 26th. So you want a meeting between the 19th
So
and
what
the
day of the week
26th?
is the 19th?
Thursday.
Okay.
And then the board meets the next Thursday,
I'd like to meet that Friday, I gotta tell you.
the 20th.
That's
I've got
the 20th of.
a paella cooking class at 6:30 that night.
A what, a paella cooking class?
Hey, man, I got priorities. Okay.
I think Monday would be a better day if you
Oh,
could do
well,
it.
that's, well, Ron's not going to be here. So 19th really
I have nothing on the 20th.
Saturday? Or,
I have nothing on the 20th
Okay.
either, so put it in or it's gonna get filled in.
You're gone. He's gone.
What's that Monday, 23rd?
23rd?
Anybody have a conflict for Monday the 23rd?
I think I'm going to be out of town.
I have all day free, but come 4:30.
Well, 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock is a.
8 o'clock's good for me.
8 o'clock on Monday, the 23rd?
So I've got support when we need to cancel Canasta or something, right?
Well, I'm going to be out of town the 23rd, but I'll be back the 24th, Tuesday.
Can I just say one thing, we joke when we say this, but you know what, I'm gonna take this position publicly, and whatever repercussions there is, the health, safety, and welfare of this community, i.e. board meetings, trump any other social activity out there. If we need this room to conduct business, we need this room to conduct business.
We don't have to ask permission, we just tell them.
I think that we need to utilize the room when we need it, but I think you got to be kind
be
and
gentle
ask
in
in
the
an
way you do
appropriate
that.
way if they would be willing to allow us to do that. And nobody no American likes to be told to do anything.
Tuesday the 24th, correct?
So
Try for 8 a.m.
I would be.
Tuesday? I thought it was Monday the 23rd.
No, I'm out of town Monday
Oh.
the 23rd. I'll be back the 24th. You can meet without
How
me.
about
Will
you,
you be
Mary?
back the 23rd or 24th?
24th all day.
Okay.
Okay.
So Tuesday the 24th. And I'm gonna try for 8, but I will send an email out to confirm.
Okay.
And yes, asking people is so much nicer.
Oh, absolutely. Exactly. Exactly.
So it is Tuesday the 24th at 8 a.m.
Well, tentatively, yeah. But Tuesday the 24th is the date. Adjourn?
At this same location?
Yeah.